Okay, I think so. It's now 5 minutes after, so we'll go ahead and get on started here. Let me make sure that all this stuff is set up correctly. So I am going to do this on the PC that was built on Monday, on the Monday live stream. So this is going to be on the X870E system. So good evening, folks. So we're going to be doing, this is going to be definitely a much shorter stream than the previous ones that we've been doing throughout this past week, mainly because there isn't really too much. This is mainly a follow-up to the video that went live on the channel earlier today. So that is the X870E tier list video that I did. So there's a lot of comments on that video about the different motherboards. And I thought it would be interesting to let the viewers help decide like what the tier list should look like. Although I still think that the video that I did stands on its own as a valid list, I do want to take this time to get some feedback from the viewers in terms of like what they think is the S tier, the A tier, B tier, etc. I don't actually think any of these motherboards are that bad. So, hey man, Music is lit. What's the song? So this, yeah. So the music that plays at the beginning is from. It's in the description. Actually, you'll see the game. It is video game music. Believe it or not. Hey, Mike. Oh, Jim. Your name is Jim from Greece. Oh, hello. Yeah, you can ask something. You wanted to buy the 9800X3D. Which motherboard to buy? Well, did you see the video that that's on the channel from today? The tier list video is already on the channel. This is more of like a, I guess, community choice, if you will. So this is going to be the viewers like you help me decide the ranking of these motherboards. But I still think the list that I did is relevant for the most part. If I had to change 2 things about the list, well, I'll save that for later. There are 2 things on my list that I was not 100% satisfied with, although I did mention one of those when I was making that list. So I do talk about a specific motherboard in that list, which is the number 1 for me. Well, the number 1... Why are these people saying not to upgrade to X870E? Seems like the increased memory OC is better. Yeah, X870E is definitely... Yeah, I agree. If you're somebody who does not already have a AM5 motherboard and you're thinking of upgrading, I definitely recommend the X870E over the previous X670E. Because the newer motherboards have better things like the trace wire layout for the memory, for example. So you're more likely to have a better, easier time overclocking the RAM to higher speeds on the newer motherboard versus the previous motherboard. This is no different from Intel. If you guys are familiar with the Intel platform, Z790 was vastly improved compared to the previous Z690 on Intel when it came to memory overclocking. So AMD is no different. The new X870E is definitely better for overclocking RAM than the previous X670. However, the X670E was surprisingly good at overclocking RAM, especially in the later half of that motherboard's life cycle. So like in the past year, I want to say X670E got a whole lot better just because of BIOS updates and AGISA code revisions and things like that. You've already seen the video? ROG X870E Crosshair Hero. No, it's the video it's the latest video on the channel. It's X870E tier list. If you're referring to the latest video, it's the X870E tier list video. That is the latest one. Okay. Let's go through these motherboards real quick. Or not real quick, but yeah, we can go through this. So if you're thinking of getting these, so we have a total of 13 motherboards. Now I am kind of in the way, so I need to move myself up briefly. So there are some other motherboards here. Actually, maybe I should move myself up into the corner over here. Yeah, I'll move myself up here. Okay, so the Nova's gone. Wow. The Nova's already gone, guys. Well, oh man, okay. Well, see, people won't take long to figure out the best value. Like, if someone's looking for a build, they're going to figure out pretty quick what's the best choice. You know, so it's no surprise that the Nova is sold out. The Nova is the class winner. It's the top performer in terms of value, in terms of functionality. So I guess if you're new to this channel, we recently did a whole bunch of videos and live streams regarding the new X870E motherboards. Now, in the future, I am going to be covering X870. There is a difference between X870E and X870. I got a lot of comments on my tier list video. People were asking, where's the Tomahawk? You know, what about the Asus MATX or IATX or whatever, the small X870 motherboard? Now, those motherboards are in a completely different class because those are single chipset motherboards, whereas the X870E is a dual chipset motherboard. So they have to be treated separately because you're not comparing the same product. You can't take a single chipset motherboard and compare it to a dual chipset motherboard and expect it to do better. It's not a fair comparison. So these are treated as one category. So X870E is graded together as a group, and then X870 will be graded as a separate group as well. And that's because X870 is actually B650E with the inclusion of USB 4 and Wi-Fi 7. So those are the main differences. In Europe, Nova's was not even at in the market. Wow. Yeah, well, okay, so what I can tell you, some of these motherboards are not available for sale yet. So, like, for example, the NZXT, this one is not for sale yet. It's coming soon. So is the MSI Godlike. The Godlike, as far as I know, is not for sale yet. And neither is the BioStar Valkyrie. And the Nova, it depends on the market. But I think most of the ASRock boards should be out by now. So we're going to let the chat, we're going to let the viewers decide the tier on this video compared to the official video that I uploaded earlier today based off of, and the thing is that video was based off of all of the discussions and the deep dive discussion that took place over the course of 1 week. So what do you guys want to start with? Do we want to do, like, do we want to just go through this randomly, or do we want to go through this, like, brand by brand? Do we want to just start randomly, just pick one and then just go with that? But I got a lot of comments on the tier list video. In fact, I don't think I've ever gotten that many comments in one video on this channel within the first 3 hours of the video. So I was like, okay, I gotta do I have to do a follow-up live stream because of this topic. This topic is apparently very popular. So the Asus ROG motherboard is very well. No, we're gonna get into that. Let's go from the cheapest to the priciest. The cheapest to the priciest. Well, okay. Do we really want to do that? It's gonna be weird because, well, okay. You guys want to go cheapest to priciest? All right, we'll start off. The very first one is going to be the very first one on the list is this one. This one just so happens to be the cheapest one. The Gigabyte Aorus, so the X870E Aorus Elite Wi-Fi 7. This is the cheapest motherboard. In my video, I said this is a B tier motherboard. And I gave the following reasons. This is a 6-layer PCB. The previous generation of this was a 8-layer. It was an 8-layer PCB, whereas this one is now a 6-layer. So Gigabyte is actually downgrading the motherboard compared to the last generation. And it's still coming in at $320 US. So $320. Page crashed. Oh boy. It didn't save my files, did it? I gotta go find my files. Hold on, where did I put it? Let's see. Okay, let's start this over. So, the Aorus... Wait, why is this website, like, crashing on me? Well, let me do a actual full refresh of this. That's weird. Didn't do that at all earlier. Okay, so the first one Oh, I gotta change the letters. Unless we want to do it like this, where there's only one S and then there's like multiple. But I like to do S plus, S, A, B, and C. Mainly because there's actually not that many bad motherboards. So even if you choose, like for example, I'm saying that the Aorus Elite is a B tier motherboard. Even though this is a B tier motherboard, that doesn't mean that it's terrible. So I want to point that out. Like just because it's in B doesn't mean that it's terrible. Like last generation, there were motherboards that were actually in the C tier. This time around, at least with the ones that are launching, none of them are actually that bad. Most of them are actually pretty decent. In fact, I would say this is an okay motherboard. Like if you don't really want to spend too much money on a motherboard and Gigabyte Aorus Elite is available in your market locally, then it's not terrible. However, the reason why it's here, the only reason why the Gigabyte Elite and the Gigabyte Pro are both in B, based off of my own research and my own basically scouring all of the documents and reading all the spec sheets, the only reason why these two are down here as opposed to like being higher up, two things. One, they're both 6-layer PCBs, and second, the Nova exists, and the Nova is what I consider an S plus motherboard. It's actually in an entirely different class all by itself. Because when you think about it, the Nova from ASRock and the 2 GB Aorus Elite and the Aorus Pro, all three of these motherboards are in the price range between $300 and $400. So the Elite is $320. The Pro is about $360, $350. See, the problem is the ASRock Nova, the Phantom Gaming Nova, is also $350 while providing an 8-layer PCB. It provides 5 M.2 slots, whereas these two only provide 4 M.2 slots. And on top of that, the ASRock Nova does not share any of the GPU lanes with the M.2 drives, whereas both of these Asus boards share lanes. So meaning as soon as you plug in your second and third, or your second or third, doesn't matter which one, or both, as soon as you plug an M.2 in either one of those, M.2 number 2 or M.2 number 3, in either of these boards, you will drop your graphics card lane count to half bandwidth, to X8 lanes. Whereas with the Nova, you never have to worry about that happening because it always provides the full 16 lanes while also providing a 5th M.2 slot. Yes, and the Nova is also an 8-layer PCB, whereas these two are only 6-layer PCBs. So it's very hard to objectively say that the Gigabyte boards are equal to the ASRock Nova because they just plain aren't. They just aren't. The Nova is clearly better. There's no denying that. Like, if somebody is saying that the Aorus Elite or the Aorus Pro is better than the Nova, then they're either a Gigabyte fanboy or they literally did not read any of the documentation, or they didn't watch any of the live streams that I did last week that went over the block diagrams in detail. So the Nova is definitely in a class of its own. Like, none of the others come anywhere close. So that's why there's such a divide. I had to basically split the three of them apart. I had to give ASRock the win because, you know, that's how it is. It's like, just look at the specs on paper. Hey, RK. Yeah, all the ASRock boards are 8-layer. At least all the X870E boards are 8-layer. Now, having said that, the only two boards that are not 8-layer are these two. Only the Gigabyte Elite, the Aorus Elite, and the Aorus Pro are 6-layer PCB. Every other motherboard on this list is 8-layer or more. So I want to point that out. So that's the reason why these two are down here in the B tier, because they're, you know, Gigabyte is cheaping out. Now, on the positives compared to the previous generation, at least Gigabyte has added a postcode and the quick disconnect button for both of these. Whereas in the previous generation, neither of them had the postcode, and I think one of them, I think the Elite had a larger, what do you call it? The larger tab for the GPU, so it was easier to reach, but it wasn't a button that you would press. You know, that was only on the Master, whereas now Gigabyte has added that to both of these motherboards. So at the end of the day, if the Nova is available for you in your local market, that is the best choice in the $300 to $400 price range. I mean, even if the Nova was $400, it's still an excellent choice. The last thing I want to say about the Nova is the Nova has a backplate. The Nova has a full backplate on the back of it, whereas neither of these motherboards have backplates. So that is an example of ASRock going above and beyond in terms of like giving you way more than what you would expect, considering how expensive motherboards have gotten in this current day. So yeah, the backplate, I said it in the video, it's the icing on the cake. They did not have to include a backplate on a $350 motherboard, because typically if you want a backplate, you have to pay essentially $700 if you want one. So ASRock's giving you a backplate at like, you know, more than half the price, $350. So to me, it's a no-brainer. Like there's a reason why I say this motherboard is S+, and hopefully that point has been made clear. Okay, so those are the cheapest ones. You know, the ironic thing, we wanted to go from the cheapest to the most expensive. Well, you know what's funny? The best motherboard ends up in the cheapest price class. This is one of the cheapest motherboards. That factors in. That factors in as to why it's up here. But even if this was like $400, $450, it would still probably be the best one. The Nova Wi-Fi is already sold out on Newegg. You got to get it next batch. Yeah, I had a feeling it would sell out. I didn't know it would sell out as fast as it did, though. I thought it would actually be in stock for at least a week or two. But man, it's gone already. Wow. It doesn't take long for people to figure out which one's the best one. But see, that tells you something. That tells you something. The fact that the Nova, it hasn't even been a week since that motherboard's been on the market, and it's already sold out. It hasn't even been 7 business days, and the thing's already sold out. So that says a lot. I don't think any of the others are sold out. Unless ASRock meant to only make a few of those. I think they're going to make more. But yeah, I'm not surprised, actually, at the end of the day. Yeah, I know. You were the one who mentioned it. Yeah, I remember. I won't forget. I remember. Lunar Lake doesn't have motherboards. Lunar Lake is a mobile part. That's already out. Those are for laptops. The Gigabyte Elite was only $320 on Newegg and has a postcode, but has bad PCIe lane distribution. Well, okay, hold on. So the Gigabyte boards are actually very flexible in terms of their lanes. So you can do a lot with these Gigabyte boards. Don't think, just because I'm saying these two are B class doesn't mean that they're bad. Like they're not as good as the Nova, because the value is definitely not as good as the Nova. The Nova really makes them look bad, but if you look at them as they are, they're still offering very good features. Like, for example, even though there's 6 layers, if you don't care about overclocking, that doesn't really matter. And that's probably what Gigabyte's banking on. They're probably assuming that someone who's going to buy the Elite or the Pro doesn't care about overclocking, or they're not really going to do hardcore overclocking. Like, they're not going to try to push the RAM to like 8400, for example, and they're not going to try to use B clock overclocking on the CPU. So that's the reason why these don't have the asynchronous mode, and they're probably the worst ones when it comes to overclocking RAM, just by the sheer fact that they only have 6 layers. So they have the worst electrical noise isolation characteristics. That being said, I guess we should talk about, well, do you guys want to do the Valkyrie Or see, I think it's gonna get boring if we just go by the lowest cost one. Let's do the. I don't know which one to do next. You guys just want to do the Aorus Master and get Gigabyte's last one out of the way? See, the Master is going to be better. The Master is going to be better than these two. Yes, it's more expensive, but it has 8 layers. It basically has everything that most people would need. The one thing about the Master that is a little disappointing is the GPU lane sharing. All the Gigabyte boards have GPU lane sharing. So as soon as they all have 4 M.2 slots. 2 of them are, 3 of them are Gen 5, and 1 of them is Gen 4. I think what they should have done was either 1 Gen 5 and 3 Gen 4, which is what ASRock did, and that's why ASRock avoided the lane sharing, or they should have done 2 Gen 5 and 2 Gen 4, which is what MSI and Asus did, and that way they could avoid, if somebody wanted to run 3 M.2s, they could still have full bandwidth to the GPU. So out of all of them, Gigabyte is the worst choice when it comes to avoiding the lane sharing. Because unfortunately, all 3 of the Gigabyte boards have lane sharing. 2 of the M.2 slots take lanes from the graphics card slot on all 3 of these Gigabyte boards. And that's like the one thing that drops the Master from S to A. It's really the one thing. I feel like Gigabyte could have done something a little bit more different with the Master to differentiate it from the other 2, and that could have probably propelled it into the S tier. But unfortunately, the only thing different is it's 8 layer, whereas the other 2 are 6 layer, and it's got a little bit more fancy RGB. I mean, at the end of the day, it has dual LAN. I believe it has dual LAN. I hope it has dual LAN. Whereas the others don't. And the Gigabyte Aorus Master, actually, I don't think it has dual LAN, but it has 5 gig LAN, whereas the other 2 only have 2.5 gig LAN. So, it's kind of underwhelming, to be honest, compared to the previous Aorus Master. So that's kind of why it ended up where it did. However, one of the things I do want to point out about Gigabyte, because all 3 Gigabyte boards are very similar in terms of the PCIe layout and the lane allocation, if you learn 1 Gigabyte board, you already know all the Gigabyte boards, because all of them are basically the same. All of them have the exact same PCIe lane placement. All of them have the exact same X4, dual X4s at the bottom. 1 Gen 4 and 1 Gen 3. So very consistent lineup is what I would say. Just there's not. I feel like Gigabyte, they're a victim of their own design language, in the sense that all 3 boards are so similar that I just wish that there was a little bit more nuance in the differences between the Gigabyte boards. And I think that's what would have set them apart better. Yeah, the using up the PCI Gen 5 lanes for USB 4 was really weird, because the previous generation, if you had an X870E motherboard that featured USB 4, because some of them did. For example, the Asus X870E Hero and Extreme, both of those motherboards included USB 4. But both of them connected them to the Gen 4 chipset. They did not connect to the Gen 5 lanes. I do feel like it's really weird that every single one of these new motherboards took 4 Gen 5 lanes to connect to a Gen 4 USB 4 controller. So that is kind of, mind-boggling. I don't really know why they all did that, but they all did. The X870E Hero doesn't even have a backplate at $650 to $700. Really? Wow. See, and that's another example of why the Nova is where it is. It's just too good. There's just too much value. $350 and it has a backplate. That's crazy. Does only Asus officially support ECC? No. ASRock supports ECC memory. Asus supports ECC memory, but currently on these motherboards, it does not actually function. So if you plug ECC memory into the ASUS board, it will boot up, but it will not actually enable the error correction. The error correction will not run on the ASUS motherboard. The memory will work, but it'll treat it like it's regular UDIM. ASRock, it works. And Gigabyte, I can't remember. Gigabyte, either it does or it doesn't, and MSI is the opposite of Gigabyte. I think MSI is the one that doesn't support ECC. MSI doesn't support ECC at all. ASRock, definitely does support ECC, and I forget what Gigabyte's stance on the ECC was. I forget. But no, ASUS currently on these boards, on the current BIOS for ASUS, if you plug the ECC RAM in, it will boot up, but if you check for the error correction function, it's actually not enabled on ASUS. It's like just pass-through or something. Nova has a new audio codec. Have I seen Gerbauer's video explaining the Nitro path? It's mainly for the empty RAM slots. I have not seen the video, but I've already covered Nitro path. What I can tell you is I am currently running the Nitro path motherboard with 4 sticks of memory. I don't know if you were here previously. Let me see. Where's my... Hold on. Where's the camera? Okay. Alright, so this is the X870E. This is X870E, and look at that. 4 sticks of RAM. 4 sticks of memory, DDR5, running at 6,000 on the Nitro path. This is on an ROG Crosshair Hero. This is the one that we did the live build. So I can tell you that the Nitro path does seem to work. Will I do a review for the motherboards for the upcoming Intel CPUs? We will be covering Z890, yes. Okay, so currently this is where it is. But Gigabyte, I would say the Master is good. It's totally fine. It's a solid A. It's just not an S. And I think most people would agree. Just not enough differentiation between the Gigabyte parts this time around. What's next? I mean, do you guys agree with this? Do you guys agree with this? Gigabyte Master at A, Elite and Pro are in B, and Nova is in S+. I think it's pretty... This is pretty straightforward, I would say. I don't have Patreon. I think I probably need to get that set up, apparently. But I do have Super Chat. So if you want to support the channel with a Super Chat, and then your message will show up, and it'll actually be read live. I mean, that is one way to support. Probably do need to look into Patreon, though. Because as the channel gets larger, I'm going to have to make more diverse video on different hardware, and I don't have any... I don't get any review samples, guys, so there's no way. Like, all the videos, all the hardware that you see me unbox and build and use and showcase, that is spent with my own money. So that's why we're definitely a bit limited on what I can actually do or show in person. Gigabyte is cheapest at your market, and if you don't need 16 core or 6,004 sticks, it will work. Yeah, Master is 8 layers, though. Don't forget, this is 8 layer. So this one is better than the other 2 gigabytes. Okay, let's do let's do the... You know what? Let's do the ProArt. The ProArt is one that I don't like. This is the one that I had a hard time. Like, I personally think ProArt is B. Some people will say that it's A. I had one person comment saying that it's S. It's definitely not S, for several reasons. But I think the ProArt should be B. So my original list, I basically let it go to A. But there are so many weird things about the ProArt that I don't like, which is the reason why I dropped it down here. I mean, if it's going to be here, it'll probably be in front of the Gigabyte boards. Like this. It has 10 gig, yeah, but you know, like, okay, which do you think most people will actually benefit from? The 10 gig or a postcode? Or the 10 gig or better PCIe slot placement? Because I don't like this board for a lot of reasons. Mainly because of the price. Two things, the price and the okay, this motherboard, the ProArt is $479 and it doesn't have a debug code. In fact, it is the only motherboard out of all 13 boards that does not have a postcode. Clearly, somebody at Asus did not get the memo that last generation, everyone was complaining about having to pay $500 for a postcode debug on X670E. Fast forward 2 years, Gigabyte understood the people's complaints and they put postcodes on all their boards. Even these $300 boards now have postcodes. Meanwhile, Asus is still charging almost $500 for the ProArt, and guess what? It still doesn't have a postcode. It still doesn't have a postcode. Even though this is supposed to be like a professional workstation thing, and it doesn't even have the debug code on it. Like, how did they do that? Well, if one day your computer doesn't like respond, and you won't know what's wrong, at least not instantly, because you don't see the postcode, you don't see the error code. Yeah. So the 10 gig is kind of like, I mean, I understand. The only reason why I let this go here was because it had 10 gig. Like, its one trick pony was that it wasn't even 10 gig, because Godlike has 10 gig, and Godlike's better than ProArt. But the reason why I let it go to A is because I kind of understand what I think Asus thinks the target audience will use this board for, and that's mainly for blower style graphics cards, because the slot placement on the ProArt is actually really lousy if you want to put a large graphics card in. If you put a large, like a 4090 in the top slot, you can't even use the second slot. It covers it up. So it's like it completely defeats the purpose of having the second slot. You understand what I'm saying? The only way that would work is if someone had a blower style professional card, which is probably what they expect people to use with this, but it doesn't help the fact that Asus sells ProArt branded graphics cards that are 2.5 or to 3 slots thick. So this is definitely not A+. This should be B, barely in A at best. I still think this is a B. If it has better VRM, no. There are so much better motherboards than the ProArt. There's no way. There's no way. You know what? You know what kills the ProArt? Asus's Strix. Asus's own Strix. E-E. The E-E Strix is so much better than the ProArt in every single way, except for the gimmicky 10 gig that the ProArt has. That's like the one thing. Oh, and it's the only motherboard that has the DisplayPort input. That's like the one trick pony that it has. Its gimmick is that it has DisplayPort input. It can't claim that it's the only one that has 10 gig because the Godlike also has 10 gig. So it's like, and it's like, okay, it has 10 gig plus 2.5. Well, the Godlike has 10 gig plus 5 gig. So it's like it puts it back in its place. So yeah, no. This thing should have a postcode. At nearly $500, it is near borderline unacceptable that this doesn't have a postcode when every other motherboard, including the $500 Strix, has a postcode. The other thing too is the Strix. So okay, let's rephrase this, guys. Which of these two Asus boards would you rather get? The E-E Strix or the ProArt? Both of them are almost the exact same price. The ProArt comes in at $20 less than the Strix. How is the ProArt better than the Strix? Oh, let's compare these two. Let's compare these two. How many M.2 slots does the ProArt have? The ProArt has 4. How many M.2 drives on the board does the Strix have? It has 5. This has 5. This has 4. Oh, and guess what? If you wanted to dabble in overclocking, guess what? The Strix has asynchronous E clock. This has the dual B clock overclocking. This one does not have that. So it's lacking that. Now, okay, I get it. This is not meant for overclockers. Okay, but, you know, they're almost the exact same price. And the Strix has better heat sinks for the Gen 5 SSDs. This thing has thick boy heat sinks while also providing the base clock asynchronous mode. This is like, it's so objectively better than the ProArt, and it has the postcode. Like, there's really no debating this. So people were commenting on my video, like, it's weird. Like, I got a bunch of people saying, why is the Strix and the ProArt right next to each other? The ProArt is clearly worse than the Strix. They shouldn't be in the same, like, they shouldn't even be next to each other. And I agreed, because you guys go back and watch my video. In the very beginning, when I started talking about ProArt, I was like, I think this should be B, but, you know, it has some gimmicks that puts it up here. Whereas the Strix is solidly above the ProArt. ProArt will be 100, same as that. And you can put cheap PCIe to 10 gig adapter on Strix. Exactly. Because the Strix has an X4 slot at the bottom. You can easily add a 10 gig into the Strix. Meanwhile, the ProArt puts the second slot so close to the first one that as soon as you put a 4090 in here, you can't even use the second slot on the ProArt. This is what I mean by the ProArt is so, like, there are so many weird, like, why is it configured this way questions that come up that are just mind-boggling. Like, what was ASUS thinking when they put this thing together? Like, I don't understand. I mean, like, here's the truth, guys. If somebody was really serious about building a professional workstation, they're not going to buy this ProArt. They're going to go buy a WS Pro Series Sage. They're going to buy a Threadripper Sage from ASUS, and they're going to build a workstation out of that. They're not going to be buying a ProArt. Wow, on cue. Kenny with the sub, on cue, man. Appreciate it. Strix has postcode, superior internal ICs. ProArt made more sense in the past with USB 4 wasn't standard. Correct. Yes. And there was other confusion, like in the comment section. I read one comment, someone was saying that the ProArt USB 4 can allow you to connect USB-C monitors to it. You can do that with every single one of these motherboards. So it's like, that isn't even like an exclusive feature on the Pro anymore. Like, even the cheapest Gigabyte can do dual monitors off of both USB 4 ports. So it's like, and all of them are 4K 60, DisplayPort 1.2 or DisplayPort 1.3, whatever the standard was, or I think it's DisplayPort 1.4 even. So, you know, it isn't even like a factor for the ProArt. ProArt clearly is worse than the Strix. Now, if anything, the Strix, when I was thinking about the Strix might actually be up here. That's how much of a difference the Strix and the ProArt are. Like, for $20 more, like if you want to pay $20 more instead of buying a ProArt and get the Strix instead, you're getting a much better choice. Way better heat sinks for M.2, especially Gen 5 M.2 drives. You're still getting a 5 gig LAN. It's so weird how ProArt's like 10 gig plus 2.5, but the Strix is the 5 gig. They give you the one that's in the middle, where it matters. Why is the Strix better than the Master? Mainly because the Strix has... Well, actually, that's a good question. You know what? That is a very good question. So why is it better than this? Now you got me thinking about that, because the Master, I believe the Master does have the asynchronous B clock as well, because I just tested the Master today, and sure enough, it has asynchronous clock mode, at least the previous generation. So my original gut feeling was both of these are here, and that's kind of where they should be. But the bottom line is the Strix E is better than the ProArt. Like, hands down, it's better. Like if I was building a productivity, like a content creator PC, I would choose the Master and the Strix before I even look at the ProArt. Because if I want 10 gig LAN, I can use the bottom slot on the Master, or I can use the X4 slot on the Strix. So it's very easy to add 10 gig to either of these, and you're not using lanes from the GPU. To answer the question about the Strix, why is the Strix better? The Strix has, if we want to get really technical, the Strix has 5 M.2 slots. This has 5 M.2 slots. The Aorus Master only has 4. So that is one difference. However, the reason why the Master has 4 and the Strix has 5 is because Gigabyte opted to give you a second X4 slot. There are dual X4 PCIe slots on the Master. The Strix only has 1. So it's like, take your pick. Do you want a 5th M.2 or do you want a second X4? That's why, in my mind, both of these guys tie. They effectively tie. And if you favor M.2, get the Strix. If you favor expandability, get the Master. They're both $500. They're basically rival motherboards. So these two are kind of even in a lot of ways. Both of them have really good cooling on their M.2s as well. Better than average. In fact, I think the Strix probably has the best cooling for M.2. Second is probably either this or the Taichi. You saw a video comparison of the Taichi versus the Master versus the Carbon versus Crosshair, and Gigabyte has 30% faster load time. Okay. I mean, all that does is that means that these two tie. I know exactly which video you're referring to. Yeah, Gigabyte is the fastest at booting. I will agree there. Keep in mind, guys, I have the X670E Aorus Master. So I have the last generation Aorus Master from Gigabyte. That is actually the PC that I use for Tech Thursdays. So I'm not using it right now. I'm actually using the X870E Crosshair Hero. Like, if you guys see me, like, on the Thursday show, and there's a green screen, like, it's just me and the lights and everything, that means I'm using the Aorus Master. Because that is the live stream PC. But yeah, Gigabyte is very fast at booting up. I don't know. It has to do with their UEFI implementation. So anyway, that's Gigabyte, and that's Strix. So yeah, I think they're both kind of like where they are. But ProArt needs to be down here because someone at ASUS clearly didn't get the memo on how to, like, make this better. Okay. So... which one do you guys want to do next? You know, we haven't done an MSI board. We should probably do Carbon next, because we're talking about these big rivals. You're running ROG Maximus Hero? Looking to upgrade soon? Okay. We're not going to talk about that right now because that's unreleased. So, the Carbon... Let's do Carbon next, because Carbon is the other $500 motherboard. So Gigabyte has their $500 Aorus Master, ASUS has their $500 Strix, MSI has the Carbon. Now, I think the Carbon is also an A motherboard. Some people think it should be higher. I don't really know why it would be significantly better than these two. It's literally the same price. And I feel like you can't really go wrong with any of these three. They all have GPU lane sharing. So it's like they all falter in the same area. All of them have GPU lane sharing. All of them have an X4 slot. So it's like all three of them are very, very similar in a lot of ways. The difference is that the Strix gives you a 5th M.2 with the X4. The Gigabyte gives you 2 X4, and the Carbon gives you an X4 and an X8 that shares lanes with the GPU. So all three of them they all have a unique difference. So that none of them are exactly the same. They're all the same price. but all of them do something different. So this is an example of choosing based off of what you're actually going to do with the computer. Are you going to run a lot of expansion? Then Gigabyte Aorus Master is the best choice. Are you going to, or do you want a fifth M.2 drive? And also the single X4. That's the Strix. So I feel like the Strix strikes the right balance at the end of the day. The Carbon gives you the most like PCIe options because they give you an X8 that takes its lanes from the GPU, and then they also give you an X4 which has its own lanes. So, and then it still has the 4 M.2 drives. So the Carbon is also very unique in terms of what it can do. The Carbon is also, Carbon and Gigabyte, I guess Carbon and Master are both fully 100% toolless. They do not use screws for their M.2 drives anymore, whereas the Strix is partially toolless. Some of the heat sinks do not require the screwdriver, but some of them still do on the Strix. 444, not 8. No, it's 8-4. It's, wait, what are we talking about? Gigabyte is 1644. MSI is 1604 or 884 or 844 if you have the second Gen 5 SSD plugged in on the Carbon. So the Carbon is the most complicated to figure out the lane mapping because of that X8 slot and the second Gen 5 SSD. That's the reason why. How do you make the difference between a 6 and a... what? How do I know the difference? Because of the product. I read the product page. The Asus the Asus X870E-E, it's $520 in Germany. Oh yeah, that's expensive. Yeah, in euros, man. Yeah. In the manual, it shows 1644. It's 16.8. It's 1604 or 884 or no, it's 16 0. So 16 0 meaning nothing's in the second slot, and then X4 or 884 or 844 if the M.2 is plugged in. Okay, load time, you mean boot time? Yes, we're talking about the post time, yes. Well, not post time, we're talking about the boot time. Correct. And Gigabyte's the fastest there. Which of the new motherboards have access to the overclocking for X3D? Excellent question. So that is something that we've been trying to find out. Right now, it's hard to tell. Right now, I know for a fact that the Strix has E-clock. The Hero, which we'll talk about soon, has E-clock. The Godlike has E-clock. And possibly the Master, because the previous Master had E-clock. That's why I'm guessing that the new one has. I don't see Gigabyte removing that. And then I believe... So the rumor is that the Taichi from ASRock also has E-clock. But I have not been able to... It is mentioned briefly in ASRock's user manual, but not the BIOS manual, which is really weird. Nova's out of stock everywhere. Yeah, because people figured out that it was broken. People figured out that it was like too broken. It was way too much value. It was completely unfair to the other brands, so they just bought it out. Yeah, man. Nova was too good. Nova was too good. The fact that it's sold out proves that it's S+. It's the only one that's sold out. That's what's funny. It's completely sold out everywhere. All $500 have asynchronous RAM, I think. Well, so the question is, does the Carbon have asynchronous E-clock? Does anybody know if the Carbon... Does anybody have the X670E Carbon? Can they confirm that? Because I don't know. That is an excellent question, and I really wish I knew the answer. I do know that the Strix, the Master, the Hero, and the Godlike, and possibly the Taichi, but I don't know that 100% on the Taichi. So I don't know. What do you guys think? You guys think that all three $500 boards are right in there in the middle? I think they should be in the middle. It has to offer 2 B clocks, not just one. No, that's not correct, because I tested the Aorus Master and it doesn't affect the RAM. As long as you set asynchronous mode and you have the RAM hard-coded to a specific divider, it works. So it should be the same for all of them. Now, that is something that may have changed with BIOS updates in the past year, because I think at launch of the X670E, it was like what you're describing. The way it works on Gigabyte is Gigabyte doesn't let you change the PCIe base clock. It only lets you change the CPU facing B clock when you select asynchronous mode. That's how Gigabyte does it. Now what Asus does, Asus gives you 2 separate ones. They give you eClock 0 and eClock 1, or maybe it's eClock 1 and eClock 2. On which board? On the Taichi or the Strix? All these motherboards will work with 9800X3D. Yes. You finally got the 7800X3D running 6400. Yeah, Nova's in a class by itself. So I guess there's only 6 left now. Let's do Taichi. Taichi is the last, like, $500 one. This one is either here or it's here. Now, the thing about the Taichi, I really wish ASRock would state on the website whether or not this actually has the eClock mode or not. Because if it does, it should be here. If it doesn't, it's kind of debatable whether it's S or A. The Taichi at best is S, at worst it's A. Which is ironic because all 4 of these are almost the same price. The Taichi is $50 less than the other 3, which is why it does seem like it is a better value, at least up front. It's also an extended ATX, so it actually has slightly more surface area for the heat sinks. The M.2 heat sinks are larger. They cover more area. The VRM heat sinks are really big. The other thing about the Taichi is it is the only one that is like 24. I think it's like 24 plus 2 plus 1 VRM. It has the most overbuilt VRM out of all of them. The Taichi only has 1 LAN port. Yes, you're correct. It has a 5 gig. So does the Strix. The Strix only has a 5 gig. So it's the same as the Strix in terms of the LAN, but it's cheaper than the Strix. That's what I'm saying. So like and it has a bigger VRM. So it's like, do you want a eATX or do you want an ATX? Do you want 6 SATA or do you want 4 SATA? This is also the only motherboard that has 6 SATA. So, and I guess while we're talking about Taichi, we can also add Taichi Lite. Taichi Lite is either here or here. And the reason why it would be here is because this is $100 less than these other 3. This is $399, so this is $400. While it provides everything that the Taichi has, except it does not have the very useful and very convenient quick disconnect for the graphics card. So the Taichi has the latch for the GPU. This does not. So this one, like if you're using like for example, if you have a giant air cooler like this this Deepcool AK620, for example, if you have this and the GPU's down here and you want to upgrade your graphics card and you're on a Taichi Lite, good luck trying to get the graphics card out because the giant cooler is blocking the path. So that is the reason why I feel like the Taichi Lite, because it's missing that, it's like, okay, that's the reason why it's $50 less than the Taichi. But it's still providing an excellent value. ASRock gets to the market without discount. Asus and Gigabyte have promotions with cashback for review. That must be a local market thing. It's hard to know the actual motherboard names because they're just images and not the names. Oh. Well, yeah, they were talked about in the video, and there was a really long live stream. I did a 5-hour live stream, and we went through all the block diagrams and everything. It was extremely long. This is more of like a follow-up to those videos. But yeah, I kind of think this is how it should be. Especially if this does, in fact, have the base clock overclocking. Yeah, I think this one should be here. So, one thing to add. Lee with the sub. Appreciated. Welcome to the channel. So, the one thing I want to say about ASRock. The reason why ASRock is ranking so high relative to some of the others. Like, for example, if you guys look, Gigabyte has an A and like 2 Bs. ASRock has S plus spot, S spot, and A. Unless we want to say this is B because it doesn't have a GPU latch. But it's only $400. So it's weird. But the thing is, these are cheaper. But this is giving you more. So it's so hard to place the Taichi boards. The reason why ASRock is placing so high, you know why? No lane sharing. No lane sharing. Case in point, Nova. Nova has 5 M.2 slots. You can plug all 5 M.2 slots with SSDs, and guess what? The GPU connected on the Nova is still running at full 16 lanes. Similarly, the Taichi and the Taichi Lite both do the same thing. Now, these two only have 4 M.2s, whereas the Nova has a 5th M.2. So these two only have 4, but you can still fill all 4 SSDs up, and you still have full 16 lanes to the graphics card. That is why, this is one of the reasons why ASRock is ranking very high on this list, because when I did the live stream and we went through all the block diagrams, we went through in detail on all the specs. This was like, it took me 5 hours. This was a 5-hour live stream to go through every single one of these motherboards in meticulous detail and figure out what was what, which ones had lane sharing, which ones did not. And at the end of the day, none of the ASRock motherboards share GPU lanes. All 3 of these ASRock motherboards ensure that the GPU is always 16 lanes. And I got a lot of comments when I did the live build with the Asus board. A lot of people were, concerned. They were voicing their concern about GPU lane sharing for M.2s. And we come to find out all of the ASRock boards don't share lanes. So this is one of the reasons, probably the strongest reason, why ASRock is ranking so high this generation. Because where everybody else took one step back, ASRock took the step forward, especially in the case of the Nova, where they went above and beyond providing a 5th M.2 while still providing 16 lanes to the GPU. And they included a backplate. And it's only $350. Like, you can't even argue against that. That is way too good. Way too good. Should above 4G decoding be on as well? Yes, it should be on. Yes. If you're running resizable bar, that should be turned on. Taichi is amazing. Taichi is also very good. Taichi has the most VRM power stages. It has the thickest heatsink, although Gigabyte has a very good heatsink for their VRM. But the Taichi has 24 plus 2 plus 1 phase VRM. It has the biggest VRM. It is an EATX board, which means it has more surface area for cooling on the M.2 and the VRM. So it is a beast of a motherboard at the end of the day, and it is $50 less than the other 3 in the same category. So it's cheaper while offering more. It just gives you more for less money. This is the reason why ASRock is ranking so high on the list. I hope that makes sense to people watching, because, like, objectively, you have to give credit where credit's due. You can't just say, oh, this one's better because it has better RGB. No, we're looking at the function and the features and at the value of the certain price point. The whole package. You got to grade these things on the whole package. At the end of the day, ASRock is providing the best value hands down. So you got to give credit where credit's due. ASRock has done an excellent job with this launch. ASRock has twice as many power stages. Yeah, overbuilt VRMs. They're giving you a backplate on a $350 board when the closest Asus board that offers a backplate is a $700 Crosshair Hero. So I'm kind of torn on the Hero. Like, the Hero is either S or it's A. It's either S or it's A. Now, you go talk to any hardcore overclocker, and they're going to tell you that the Hero needs to be S. They're not going to say S+, they're just going to say it needs to be S. It's $700, so it is one of the most expensive motherboards for X870E, coming in at $700. It does not have a dedicated X4 slot. That's another thing against it. And it only has 6 10 gig USB Type A on the back, whereas the $500 Strix offers 9. So it's like 3 less USB than the Strix and $200 more. So it's like, it's hard to see where the value for the Crosshair Hero lies unless you look at the things that it offers that none of the other boards offer, namely that it has slim SAS and it has a few more toggles for overclocking. That's really the only thing it can do. It has that X8 just like the Taichi, which is why I kind of put it right next to the Taichi. It has 5 M.2 slots, just like the Nova. However, unlike the Nova, the Crosshair shares GPU lanes to provide 2 out of those 5 M.2s. So at the end of the day, it's like, take your pick. Do you want 5 SSDs in the Nova with 16 GPU lanes, or do you want three SSDs in the $700 Crosshair for 16 lanes? Otherwise, you're going to be running, as soon as you run the 4th M.2, you're dropping your GPU to 8 lanes on a $700 motherboard. So that's why I kind of want to put this down here, but it's very hard because it does have things that none of these other boards offer, particularly if you're an overclocker enthusiast. That's really the only reason why the Hero gets to stay in S tier. But otherwise, I can definitely see why people would rank this lower. In fact, if you're comparing the Hero directly to the Strix, I feel like Asus is their worst own enemy, because the Strix arguably could be S and the Hero would be down here. Because the Strix is $500, the Hero is $700. It's not really offering, the question is it really offering $200 more in value over the $500 Strix when they both provide 5 M.2 slots and the Strix has better heat sinks versus the Hero? And the Strix has more USB on the back. Yes, the Hero has dual LAN, but it doesn't have 10 gig LAN. So it's almost like it defeats the purpose. So it's like, do you favor 10 gig LAN? Then you would put this here and you put this here. If you favor more USB and better heatsink cooling and less money, you probably put this here and you put this here. So I can see these two flip-flopping back and forth, because it's depending on who you ask, because they're so similar. But if someone looks at the price, they're going to think that the Strix is a no-brainer compared to the Hero. Like, why would you pay $200 more for effectively the same product? There's only like 2 or 3 things that are different between them. The VRM is the same. The VRM is identical between the Hero and the Strix. So it's like they're both 18 plus 2 plus 1, I believe. And they're both 8-layer PCBs. They both have 5 M.2s. They both have 5 gig LAN, but the Hero does have 2.5 gig LAN, but the Strix gives you more USB ports. So at the end of the day, the Hero has 2 gimmicks. It has 2 gimmicks that the Strix doesn't have. 1, it has slim SAS. 2, it has an 8-pin PCIe power cable for the motherboard to provide quick charging to the 20 gigabit front panel USB-C. Those are the only two major things that it offers that you cannot get with the Strix. Now the question is, are those two things and the additional overclocking tools worth $200? That is the question you have to ask yourself. 5 M.2 slots for you to file copy. I know, right? And as soon as you use as soon as you use any of those additional, like the second or the third M.2 on both the Strix and the Hero, you drop your GPU to X8 speed. They both suffer from lane sharing. Whereas none of the ASRock boards have lane sharing. See, that's at least with the GPU. So that's the reason why, I mean, it's kind of a toss-up between the Strix and the Hero. I feel like Asus, at the end of the day, Asus is competing with themselves. Like, between these two parts. Like, I don't know. They're like, the Strix is cannibalizing the sales of the Hero, and the Hero is keeping enough things exclusive away from the Strix. M.2 to God of M.2? What do you mean by the God of M.2? The God of M.2? Technically, the God of M.2 is going to be the godlike. The MSI godlike is the S tier. This is an S tier board. But it doesn't have a very attractive price. That's the only problem. Man, the godlike is very nice. The godlike is basically the Rolls Royce of motherboards. I mean, that's the only way I can put it that makes sense. It's like that Ferrari, it's like that exotic motherboard that you see it at trade shows like CES or Computex or Gamescom. Like you see it in the booth. You see it in that acrylic or glass enclosure to show it off with all the RGB. But it's something that you will rarely ever see in person. The Godlike is that special board. It's that Halo tier product that has like everything that... It's got everything that you don't even know you need. That's how I describe the Godlike. It has things that people who are going to build a PC for the first time, or they may have been building PCs for decades, there are things that the Godlike offers that they don't even know they need. That is how niche the Godlike is. But that's why it's worthy of that S tier spot. Does X8 really limit the GPU unless it's 4090? I mean, half bandwidth versus full bandwidth. I mean, it's that simple. You read in some overclocking technical spec Taichi had E-clock. Yeah, I really need to find out if Taichi has E-clock because I assume that it does. My assumption is that it does. I would be very surprised if it didn't have it. Considering the Aorus Master has it, the Strix has it, I would assume this does have it. Now, the question on my mind, besides does the Taichi have E-clock, does the Carbon have E-clock? That is the one that I really want to know if it has E-clock, because I know Godlike has it, I just don't know if Carbon has it. And Carbon is a $500 board, and its rivals from Gigabyte, Asus, and we're assuming ASRock, all of them have E-clock mode. So does the Carbon, does MSI have it? That's what I'm wondering. The ASRock X870E Nova Wi-Fi has good VRMs. Yes, it does. It does. Carbon usually doesn't have E-clock. They usually put it on the Ace. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Because, see, like, here's the thing. The Ace is the rival to the Hero. The Ace is the $700 MSI board. The Hero is the Asus $700 board. So, yeah, definitely the Ace has it. But what I'm curious to know is, does MSI's $500 board have E-clock? Because Gigabyte's $500 board does, Asus's $500 board does, and we're assuming that the Taichi from ASRock also, which is $449, may also have the E-clock. Yes, Kudim is next year. Carbon usually doesn't have E-clock. Oh yeah, I just read that. Full bandwidth, but the full bandwidth is not utilized. There are some games. Horizon Zero Dawn, Horizon Forbidden West. Those are games. Basically, the Sony games scale with PCIe bandwidth. Any game that uses direct storage is also more likely, although it's not guaranteed, but some of the direct storage games are more likely to be dependent on PCIe bandwidth. What is the VRM most important for? Overclocking. With Gen 5, X8 will be enough anyway. But yeah, to your point, yes. If you have a Gen 5 graphics card, like for example, if you have an RTX 5090, that you plug that into one of these new boards and you populate, like for example, if you put that in the Aorus Master and you run all the M.2 drives on the Master, your 5090 will only have 8 lanes allocated to it. However, it will be Gen 5. The GPU's Gen 5, so it'll be Gen 5 lanes. Now, remember, it's always the lowest common denominator. So if you take a 4090, you plug it into an Aorus Master, and you populate all the SSD, or even the second and third SSD, because both the second and third SSD share lanes with the graphics card, you populate either one of those, it doesn't matter. It could be just one of them, it could be both of them. As soon as you plug one SSD into either the second or third M.2, the 4090 only gets 8 lanes. It loses half of the lanes. So that is a problem with the Master, the Strix, the Carbon, the ProArt, the Pro from Gigabyte, the Elite Aorus, all of them, the Hero, all of them. The only motherboard, that's also a problem for these two guys, well no, it's one of these guys over here, we haven't even talked about these two. The only motherboards that ensure 16 lanes no matter what are the ASRock motherboards, so Nova, Taichi, Taichi Lite, and the MSI Godlike, because the Godlike has godlike powers to prevent the GPU from losing lanes when all 5 M.2, because this thing's got 5 M.2 slots, just like the Nova, and you can populate all 5 of them, and the GPU will still run X16 on the Godlike. And it's because MSI has a secret technique that nobody thought of. It was a very clever technique that MSI came up with. But it is a secret technology or a secret method that they used, and that is the reason why they are not publishing their manual for this yet until it is worldwide availability. With Gen 5, okay. Yeah, do we have a similar ranking for X870? That will be in the future. I will work on that next. We'll do that next, but currently not right now. Okay, so there's only 2 boards left, guys. We've got the NZXT N9 and the X870E Valkyrie from BioStar. So these are definitely lesser known motherboards because these are outside of the traditional 4 brands. But what do you guys think? So the NZXT, I think I put this one here, but I don't know if it should be here. Maybe it needs to go down here. I think it should still be up here. The NZXT N9 X870E. This is actually an okay motherboard. There is only one thing that I don't like about this. The only thing that I dislike about it is it's just like the Taichi Lite in that it doesn't have a easy remove button for the graphics card. So both of these two, you have to still use like a stick or something to undo your GPU from the motherboard. They don't have a quick disconnect or a latch mechanism or anything. From what I could tell, NZXT is still old school like that. So I think this one, because this one is just like ASRock and that you don't have to worry about any lane sharing, the NZXT is a solid choice for anyone that wants to use all the M.2 slots and you don't want to think twice about where you plug your SSD in. It guarantees 16 lanes to the graphics card at all times. So NZXT is a solid A. I don't have official pricing for this. I assume this is going to be priced similar to the Taichi Lite at like $400, $449. I mean, I'd be surprised if this was $500, but I don't know. I don't know how much the NZXT motherboards traditionally cost compared to the others. But yeah, that is an NZXT motherboard. And then the very last one is the Valkyrie. The Valkyrie, I would probably put either here, B, or maybe A. But the Valkyrie, just like the NZXT, it does not have a quick disconnect for the graphics card. It does have an X8 slot, but that takes lanes from the GPU, although that could still be useful for people that want that. The other thing, too, is it has a bottom X4 slot, which is quite good. However, I think the placement of it is at the very, very bottom of the board. So if you're gonna plug something that's a double slot width down here, do note that you do need to install this in a case that has the full 8 slots. Not all mid-tower cases have 8. A lot of them are 7. So you would need to install this into a 8-slot case. So just note that about the Valkyrie. The other thing, too, that differentiates the Valkyrie from the NZXT and some of these other A tier, the Valkyrie only has 2.5 gig LAN, whereas the NZXT has 5 gig LAN. So there's another thing to note. I don't have the official pricing on this. I would assume this would be around $400 to $450, but I could be completely off on that. But anyway, that covers all of the boards overall. I think this is a nice revised list. I don't really see anything wrong with this list. Valkyrie is C. It doesn't support a lot of RAM profiles. Have disaster UEFI. Are you sure? Look at the website. Go look at the website. Have you read the documentation on the Valkyrie? I think it's a decent board. I don't think it's a terrible motherboard. So you'd have to check to see. The one thing that it doesn't have, though, it doesn't have an easy disconnect. And it's only 2.5. But these Gigabyte boards are also 2.5. So, I mean, has anybody seen this, like an actual video covering this? Because I think this is it's an okay option. It's not one that I would recommend, but I don't think it's terrible. It has a lot of USB on the back. It has good slot placement. You see the 3 slots, they're not too close. Actually, it's almost like the ProArt in that regard, actually, just looking at them side by side, but this is not to scale. So I think the Valkyrie might have one more slot down or something, but they look very similar. The Valkyrie doesn't have good Gen 5 cooling, though. That's the other thing, too. All the SSDs are, like, down here somewhere. The GPU lanes are given to M.2 drives on all of the motherboards except for the NZXT, the ASRock motherboards, and the Godlike. We've already explained it in many, many videos. Can somebody explain the lane sharing? Hold on. Maybe I'll draw it out. Okay. Can someone explain the lane sharing? I mean, we'll explain it here, but, you know, it'd be nice if someone could explain it real quick. We've done this probably, like, I don't know, a dozen times we've explained this now. So you have a motherboard and the CPU socket. All X870E and X670 are arranged like this. So you have AM5 socket. So this is not AM5, which is LGA 1718. Then you have the chipset. Promontory 21 is the code name. You have two of them if you have X870E, which is what we are talking about. And then you also have the chipset lanes. So let's do which one. Okay, guys, which block diagram should we derive? Pick one of the motherboards that has lane sharing. We can draw it out. Now here comes the exam. The exam is draw the block diagram for, you know, which motherboard? The following motherboard. This is the test. And it's like, show all the steps. Show all your work. Hero. Oh, the hero again. Man, I feel like the hero's the one that I always draw. Okay, we can draw the hero again. We've always drawn the hero, man. Oh, man, the hero. The crosshair hero again. Wow. Why is that the one that everybody wants to see? Like, I've drawn that one 3 or 4 times already. There are literally motherboards that we have not drawn at all. And it's like, people are like, hero. I know why. I know why people are asking. It's because Asus is dumb and they don't provide the block diagram in the document. Whereas the manual for the Crosshair Hero does not show you the block diagram. Meanwhile, you go look at the Taichi, you go look at the Master, or the Ace, or the Godlike. Well, not the Godlike, that's not on the line yet. But the Carbon, all of them are shown. I did draw the Taichi, but the thing is, you don't have to draw the Taichi because the Taichi's in the manual. Like, you can already look at it. So, here, here, I'll show you guys. Actually, let's do this first. Let's derive this one first, and then we'll go look at the block diagram for the others. So, yeah, we'll do hero, because people want to see the hero. Okay. Even though I think the Strix would have probably been a better one, because I don't think I've drawn the Strix. The Strix E-E. Anyway, this is going to be the X870E Crosshair Hero for the 27th time. Okay, so for every X870E motherboard, the socket has dedicated lanes because the socket is a system on chip. So it has PCIe 5.0, 24 lanes. Every motherboard, every X870E provides 24 Gen 5 CPU direct connect. That means that anything that plugs in here goes straight into the CPU, completely bypassing the chipset. The chipset is actually this. You can think of it like the backbone of the motherboard in terms of all the connectivity. But this is the CPU. This is the actual chipset. And because it's X870E, it is dual chipset. It has 2 of them. If we were talking X870, which we will talk about in the future, it only has 1. X870 only has a single chip, whereas X870E has dual chips. Hence why we do not grade them, we do not compare them together, because that's unfair. You can't take a single chip motherboard and compare it against a dual chip motherboard. It will always lose because it doesn't have as many lanes. Do for you mean the Taichi? Okay, well, let's do the hero, because if I do the Taichi does not have lane sharing, so it's very straightforward. But let's talk about lane sharing. So on here, there are 3, actually I should probably make this longer. Okay. So on here, there is 3 things that plug in here. And these go direct to the CPU. You have a switch. You have a PLX switch. You have an M.2. So you have M.2_1. And you have a USB 4 controller. So this is known as the ASM4242. People who have been watching my channel, you probably feel like you're sitting in a lecture class that you've heard probably 3 or 4 times now. Now that you hear the acronym ASM4242, it's back again. Here it is. All right, this thing has the 2 USB 4 ports on the back. So this is the USB 4 with DisplayPort alt mode. That means I can literally plug a monitor. I can take a monitor and I can use the DisplayPort cable or USB-C to USB-C. I can plug this in to the USB 4 port, and I will use the integrated graphics on the Ryzen CPU to drive the monitor. So I can do multiple displays off of this. I can even daisy chain monitors and drive multiple monitors. Claudia, welcome to the channel. Thank you for the sub. So you can daisy chain monitors, and then you can plug in a capture card over here. So that is what USB 4 offers. It offers a lot of new functionality that you did not get previously. The other thing too is USB 4 is 40 gigabit per second. So each of these ports are 40 gigabit each. So that is a lot of bandwidth from USB 4. Now here we have a switch that has, I probably should have drawn this larger. So we're going to make this larger because this is too small. Let's make this really big. Okay, so now here, I guess we'll do the lane count. This is 16 lanes. This is 4 lanes. And this is 4 lanes. The total lane count must always equal 24 lanes. Always 24 lanes. So you do the math. 16 plus 4 plus 4. 24 lanes. So now you have 16 over here. Now we're going to talk about lane sharing. All this stuff about lane sharing. So the Hero does lane sharing using this PLX bridge or PLX switch. And what it does is it has a single PCIe slot here. It has 2 M.2s in here. And then it has a second PCIe at the bottom. So we have the GPU. This is PCIe. We'll say this is PCIe 1. We have M.2 _2. I think we're gonna have to make this font smaller because this is too big. Let's make this like this. Okay. And then M.2 _3. And then we have PCIe _2. So these are all connected on the CPU lanes. So with more lanes, you can connect more things. Yes. Do you think we can expect better 10 gig USB? Especially with USB 4, yes. Consider the fact that a USB 4 is a 40 gigabit port. And a 10 gigabit is a 10 gigabit. So you can actually do 10 gig technically off of like USB-C without even using USB 4. But yeah, USB 4 accounts for like overhead and that kind of stuff. Okay, so here we have the following. So PCIe _1 can run at either 16 or it can run at 8 or 8 or 8. This is I'm going to do the matrix. This is the matrice. M.2 _2 can either run at 0, 0, or 4, or 4, or 0. M.2 underscore 3 can either run at 0 or, I gotta think about this for a second, 0 or 4 or 4. And then finally, PCIe underscore 2 can run at 0 or 4 or, hold on, no, 0, 4, no, wait, no, that's, no, okay, hold on. This. Is that right? When this is populated, okay, hold on, this is backwards. So this is 0, this is 4, this is 0, this is 4, this is also wrong. Hold on, so when this one is 4, this one is 0. This one can be 4, that one can be 4, this one can be 0, this one can be 4. Oh, you know what I'm doing wrong? This is 0. This is 0. This is 8. This is, when those are 4, that's 0. When this one is 0, this one is 4. So this is, basically I'm doing a matrice. Because the total lanes must always equal 16. And these two, yes, this is correct. Okay, this is the logic. This is a linear algebraic matrice. I mean, that's the way I'm thinking about it. But anyway, we don't need to get into that. Basically, you add the column. The total of each column must be 16. So, the sum of all of this is 16. The sum of this is 16. Because here we have 16 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0. What does that mean? That means we have a graphics card plugged in the top slot and nothing in these two, which means these are nothing in here, nothing in here, nothing in here. So guess what? The switch gives all 16 lanes to the graphics card. Now, case number 2. The second case. We have a... Let's do the summation here. Second case. We have something, we have a GPU, and we have a second GPU, or we have some other device plugged in the second X8 slot. That means the switch will say, graphics 4090, you get 8 lanes, and this guy gets the other 8 lanes. So it will do X8 and X8. Therefore, it is sharing the graphics card. I say graphics card. What I really mean to say is that these 16 lanes are getting divided equally between the top PCIe and the second PCIe slot. This will happen automatically as soon as you plug something in the second slot. It doesn't matter what it is. If you plug a 10 gigabit network card, the switch will automatically only give the graphics card 8 lanes, even though the 10 gig LAN card only needs 4 Gen 2 or 2 Gen 3 lanes. So keep that in mind. This is what we mean by lane sharing. Now, let's look at the third scenario. The third scenario, column 3. Now we sum all of these. So we have the graphics card, and we have 2 Gen 5. It doesn't even have to be Gen 5. As soon as you populate the second and third M.2 drive, the switch will say, okay, 4090, you get 8 lanes. These two each get 4 lanes each. So the math adds up. We have 8 to the GPU, we have 4 to this, and we have 4 to that. Well, I guess what I should have done, draw it like this. 8 4 and 4. So the math checks out. The total lane count equals 16 lanes. This is what I mean when I'm talking about sharing the lanes with SSDs. This is probably the only illustration on the internet that you'll find talking about this topic in this amount of detail. So now we'll look at the final scenario, the final column. This one here, the last case. Here we have the graphics card, we have nothing, we have one M.2, and we have something plugged in down here in the second slot. So in this scenario, what does it do? The switch will be like, okay, Mr. Graphics Card, you get 8 lanes. This will get 4 lanes, and this will get 4 lanes. So again, the math checks out. We will go 8 to the graphics card, we will go 4 to this M.2, and we will do 4 to the bottom PCIe slot. So once again, 8 plus 4 equals 16. So this is how the ROG Crosshair Hero behaves when you start plugging things in to the second and the third SSD slot and the bottom PCIe slot. So I hope that clarifies what the concept of GPU or lane share. I keep saying GPU because everybody's so concerned that their graphics card is only going to run at X8. Well, if you don't want it to run at X8, do not use this, and never use the second PCIe slot. Then it will always get the 16 lanes. But that's feels bad, because who wants to spend $700 on a motherboard and they're never going to be able to utilize these resources? So you might as well call this a 3 SSD motherboard if you're never going to use your 4th and 5th M.2. This is the problem with the Asus motherboards this generation. And Asus is not alone in this. Gigabyte does the exact same thing, except Gigabyte does not have a second X8 PCIe slot. Gigabyte only does the sharing across these 3. This is how the Aorus Master behaves, as well as the Aorus Elite and the Aorus Pro. All 3 gigabytes share their lanes between the graphics card and 2 of the M.2s. Isn't that wonderful? Don't you just love GPU lane sharing? Or technically we should be saying PCIe lane sharing. This is over-explaining it a bit, making it confusing with the matrices. Let's say that I buy the 9800X3D in Taichi, and I will connect 2 NVMe's and 2 hard disks and 1 5090. And what? You connect 2 NVMe and 2 hard disks and 1. Okay, first of all, the hard disks have nothing to do with this. The hard disks are over here. So let's get that out of the way. So, what do we have over here? SATA. 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 SATA over here. This is the PCIe 3.0. This is PCIe 3.0 X4 lanes. This is PCIe 4.0 X4 lanes. This is PCIe 4.0 X8 lanes. This is also PCIe 3.0 X4 lanes. So these are all the chipset connects. So let's finish what this does. So this is basically doing 4 lanes of Gen 3, 1 lane of Gen 3 per SATA interface. So you have, that is the reason why the board has 4 SATA ports, 1 per Gen 3 lane on the chipset. Now, what does Asus do that's fancy? They add something called Slim SAS on the Hero. This uses 4 lanes of Gen 4. So all of this bandwidth is tied up on the Slim SAS. So some people also think this is dumb because like who is going to spend $700 on a consumer grade overclocking motherboard to use an expensive enterprise SSD? You know, like that is really strange. Whereas what the Strix opted to do, the Strix for $200 less, the Strix included an open PCIe expansion slot. Well, actually, that's the second one. But that's what the Strix did. The Strix gives you an X4 expansion slot that does not share lanes, whereas the Crosshair Hero uses Slim SAS. All right, now we have the final two down here. So now we have the fourth. We have M.2_4 and M.2_5. So those are the final two SSDs on the Hero, and that's why the Hero has 5 M.2s. And each of these are 4 lanes of Gen 4, so you can run up to Gen 4 speeds on the final two SSDs. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 M.2s on this Hero. So if you want to avoid the GPU sharing, never use these, never use this, and you can only use 3 M.2 drives on this board. You could also use Slim SAS. So technically you can do 4 NVMe drives, but you have to use the Slim SAS for the fourth one. So it is still possible to achieve 4 M.2s off of the Hero and avoid lane sharing. I will be releasing a video in the future exploring this topic, because what I can tell you guys, I'm currently running this exact motherboard and I still maintain full 16 lanes to the GPU because I'm actually doing this. Currently my PC is already making use of Slim SAS, but that is a topic for another time. So we'll show how that works in a separate video. Slim SAS can be used with a lot of different peripherals. Is it really a serial connection? What I can tell you is this doesn't natively... So the Asus board doesn't natively support the SATA through its Slim SAS because it's going direct PCI Gen 4. So I believe only the NVMe drives work on this specific Slim SAS. I mean, I can tell you right now, I have a NVMe drive connected to my Slim SAS, and it's working at full Gen 4 speed. Yes, it has E-clock. All right, so that is the Hero. I guess just to finish off the drawing here. So we have Wi-Fi 7, we have 5 gig, we have 2.5 gig, and then I forget, what was the last thing? What was the last thing that this did? I think it did like... I can't remember what was last over here. But anyway, they do Wi-Fi 7, 2.5 gig, and 5 gig. So this is 1. I forget what they're doing, 1 or 2 or something over here. But that's basically how they do the networking on there. Because everybody kept asking. I asked people what they want me to draw, and the first thing people kept saying was Hero. Crosshair, Hero. Draw the Hero. Draw the Crosshair. Even though I've drawn it like 5 times. I basically have it memorized because I've drawn it so many times. Probably because I think people want to see this because Asus doesn't publicly show you this block diagram in their manual. So it's very hard to find this information. I think that's the reason why people wanted me to draw it. So the Strix is almost the exact same except for a few things. So if we want to convert this, so let's put, let's say if I want to draw the X870E-E Strix instead, and yellow will denote the differences. So the Strix does not have Slim SAS. Instead, it has a PCIe _2 slot. So it has an open X4 slot for expansion. So you can put 10 gig network cards in there really easily. You can run an adapter for another M.2 in there. So that is something that it does different. It also does not have the X8 slot. So this does not exist on the Strix. The Strix still maintains GPU lane sharing with these M.2s though. So keep that in mind. Because the Strix provides 5, just like the Hero, the Strix still provides 5 M.2 drives. So this is the difference between the Hero and the Strix. So this way I kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You basically get to see the Strix block diagram and the Hero one because they're very similar. The Taichi does not share lanes. Okay, let's draw the Taichi. Man, how do I make this? All right, let's draw the Taichi. Even though we can look at the block diagram, let's draw it out. All right, let's see how the Taichi looks. The Nova is actually more interesting than the Taichi, but let's show the Taichi. So the Taichi, first of all, does not, I guess we'll mark it in red. The Taichi does not have this, and it does not have this, but it does have this. So if you use the bottom PCIe slot on the Taichi, it will share the GPU lanes. It will basically do either this or this. These don't exist, so those are gone. Meaning, it's the matrix. It's either going to be 16 for the GPU by itself. If this is only plugged in by itself, that's 16 lanes. Or if you plug this in, if both of these are active, then you're going to be running 8 and 8 on the Taichi. The other thing, Taichi does not have Slim SAS. Taichi does not have Slim SAS at all. Instead, what it has is M.2 _2. And this would be, and then just think of this one as M.3 _3. So the Taichi basically says 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 M.2 drives on the Taichi. None of them are pulling lanes from the graphics card. Hence, you can run all 4 SSDs on a Taichi, and it doesn't pull any lanes from the graphics card. All right. But I think the concept is pretty clear now what the GPU lane sharing is all about. We can probably look at some of the block diagrams now just to illustrate this point once more on some of these. Let me find the manual for the Taichi. Okay, so here's the Taichi's manual. X870E Taichi. The nice thing about it is they provide the block diagram. So the thing that I just drew, ASRock provides it up front. So you can see there is that graphics card slot and there is the bottom slot. So like I showed in the matrix, either you have 16 lanes and this thing is empty, or you have 8 lanes on the GPU and 8 lanes if you plug something in down here. The switch determines how it's active. And then here's the USB 4 controller. Here's that first Gen 5. So basically all these things that you see right here are all those things that I drew in the diagram. That's all of this stuff. All of this stuff is what is shown on that block diagram. And then down here on the first chipset, you get, instead of Slim SAS, here's where Asus would put Slim SAS on the Hero. Or the Strix would have an X4 slot here. But what ASRock has done with the Taichi, they just give you another M.2. They give you 2 SATA. These 2 SATA support RAID 0 and 1 and 5 and 10. Or maybe it's 0. Yeah, I think 0, 1. RAID 0, RAID 1. I think RAID 5, and I think RAID 10. But 10 definitely. Wi-Fi 7. 5 gig LAN. And then down here on the second chip, the third and the fourth M.2. And then 4 more SATA. So the Taichi provides 6 SATA and 4 M.2. And none of the storage shares lanes with the graphics card. Is X870E for non-overclocker too? Yeah, of course. Of course, you don't have to do overclocking on it. SAS, if you're not mistaken, is serial attached SCSI, usually tops at 3. I think there's a new one. I think there's a new one, Nero, because I can... Well, you'll see. You'll see. Eventually, you're going to see a video on my channel. Be on the lookout for... So, okay. If you guys are curious about Slim SAS on the Hero, there will be a video on my channel that goes more in detail on that topic. But what I can tell you, kind of a spoiler alert, you can do Gen 4 SSD speeds on Slim SAS. Because that's what I'm doing. Using a connector called U.2 or U.3. Both. It doesn't matter. Both of them are supported. Okay, so that's the Taichi. Yeah, so this is a pretty good motherboard. You want me to draw the Nova? The Nova is actually a little bit more complex than the Taichi. Although the Taichi, I think, yeah. Okay, we'll draw the Nova. People want to see the Nova. Okay, let me make sure I remember this one. The Nova is a very unique motherboard. We're going to have to... Okay, let's do... Does blue show up? Let's do purple. Does purple show up on here? Okay, Phantom Gaming Nova. What is different about it? First of all, there's no switch. This doesn't exist on the Nova. On the Nova, you get the full 16 lanes. So we're just going to delete this entire block. Or actually, let's do it this way. Let's just... delete this. I have to draw... I'm going to top this off here. Okay. So the Nova, basically, it does this. This is the PCI... Whoops. The Nova, we'll just do white. PCIe _1. So the primary PCIe, the GPU gets the full 16 on the Nova, no matter what. No switch, no sharing, none of that nonsense. No, dedicated 16 lanes no matter what on the Nova. Then it doesn't have this rinky-dink Slim SAS. I say rinky-dink, this is actually enterprise-grade stuff. But, like, most consumers are not going to have a use case for that. So it's kind of a gimmick at the end of the day. Instead, what they do is their Nova is practical. It's like, here, I'm going to give you another M.2. And then they're going to do 2 more. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then what they're going to do is... I have to redraw some of this stuff. So this is not here. And all of this probably needs to be redone. At least most of it. Okay. So what they do is... Okay, so this is actually not X4, so I need to delete this too. Nova is actually pretty complex, guys. It has a lot of weird stuff going on the chipset at least. So they do that. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, all those are there. So the thing about the Nova that is unique is it has a fifth M.2. And the way it does that is through using a switch. So instead of sharing GPU lanes, it shares the chipset lanes. So what it does is it gives you a choice. It gives you a choice. You can either have a fifth M.2. So we'll just put this one at 3. I don't know if this is 3 or 5. The only reason why I'm labeling this as 3 is because I have 5 over there. So maybe we should just say 5 and the one down here is 3. So we'll just do that. So there's that. And then there is a second, there's a bottom PCIe slot. We'll call this _3. So what happens here, this is the 4 lanes. Oh no, actually no, this is 2 lanes. This is 2 lanes of Gen 3 shared between these, which means you have to choose. Do you want the 5th SSD without affecting the GPU? Or do you want, like, you want to plug 10 gig LAN in here, for example? Because there's not a whole lot of use cases for an X2. This is an X2 slot. Because the lane adds to 2. So you get 2 lanes of Gen 3, which is perfect for 10 gigabit LAN, because 10 gigabit LAN only needs 2 lanes of Gen 3. I have a video showing how to add 10 gig LAN using 2 lanes on the channel. That's why I know this works. Okay, so I'm speaking from first-hand experience here. All right, now, and then down here, it has, oh, actually, we got to extend this out a bit. So now it has, okay, it has 2 SATA. 1, 2. Each one of these is 1 lane. Or actually, what I'll say is, yeah, this is 1 and 1. So what they do here, this is going to be PCIe _2. So the second PCIe slot is an X1 slot. This is perfect for a sound card or a 1080p capture card, like an old school Elgato HD60 capture card or a AverMedia Live Gamer HD. You know, those would go in there. All right, and then finally down here, this X1 slot, they have a splitter. So this one is an ASM, I forget the number, it's like ASM something 61 or something. This basically splits for 2 more SATA. See, so you're basically getting a whole bunch of random stuff on the Nova, and this thing is only like 350 bucks. So you're getting a SATA _A1 and SATA _A2. So you're getting 2 SATA ports on this final lane of Gen 3. And then down here at the very bottom, you have all the networking stuff. You got Wi-Fi 7, you got 5 gig LAN, and you have the 2 remaining SSDs. So, like I said, Wi-Fi 7, 5 gig LAN, and then we have SATA 1 and 2. Each one has their own lane. So this is 1, 1, 1, and 1. So again, like I said, the math checks out. 4 lanes available, all 4 lanes used. 4 lanes available, all 4 lanes used. Nothing is wasted. Everything is accounted for. 8 lanes available, 8 lanes used. 4 lanes available, 4 lanes used. This is the reason why the Nova is so S tier. Everything is accounted for, and everything is useful. And guess what? GPU's always 16 lanes. Always 16 lanes, on the Nova. This is why this is S+. X870E supports Hyper-B clock external generator. Yes, it does, but it depends on the motherboard. Not all of them have that. I don't know if the Nova has that. That is the one thing that I don't know if it has that. I would assume that it does not have that, to be honest. I think only the Taichi has that on ASRock, because the Taichi is more expensive. Oh, and this whole thing here doesn't apply. Ignore this. This doesn't apply to this motherboard. It has so many VRMs for the price. I know, man. I know. This is why it's S+. This is why the Nova's S+. But you guys wanted to see the block diagram, so there it is. One thing. These SATA ports do not support RAID. You cannot use RAID with these because they're going through an ASM splitter. You can, however, use RAID on these. Do keep that in mind. No, I wouldn't say that. The Nova can have a second GPU, but it's not practical. You could plug the second GPU down here. Now, it's only going to have 2 lanes of Gen 3, so it's not really, it's going to be severely bandwidth limited, but technically you could plug in a second GPU. But if you're asking about multiple graphics cards, this is not going to be the motherboard for that solution. Like, you're going to want to look at Threadripper if you're seriously considering multiple graphics cards. If you're doing like AI, LLM model training workloads or inferencing or that sort of thing, not even inferencing. If you're just doing like the model training for AI, I assume you're talking about AI because you're asking about multiple graphics cards. You're probably going to want to look at a Threadripper because Threadripper can do multiple X16 with multiple graphics cards without dropping them to X8. Otherwise, I guess if you really want multiple GPU, you're probably going to want to look at a Taichi or something that has an X8 slot, for example, which is the Taichi. We just looked at it. So the best ASRock, yes, the Nova is the best value. Guys, we've already showed it. Like we've already looked at the tier list. We've done the tier list. Let me put it up on the screen again. We did the tier list. The Nova's at the top. Five NVMe's full lane GPU. Yeah, exactly. This is the S Plus block diagram, guys. This is the block diagram for the top tier motherboard. No lane sharing. No GPU lane sharing. But remember, all the ASRock boards, every single ASRock board does this. All 3 of them, the Taichi Lite, and the Nova all do the exact same thing. None of them are doing GPU lane sharing. The only thing that changes is what's happening over here. That's where the Taichi and the Nova are different. Because the Taichi doesn't give you a 5th M.2, for example. And it doesn't give you this random X1. It gives you an X8 slot that shares lanes with this guy. So actually, okay, I take that back. It's not exactly. Actually, no. Yeah. For M.2, it's the same. But the thing is, for the second second PCIe slot on the Taichi, that one does hang off of this. But we just showed that earlier. Didn't they package some Epic cores on? Yes, they have that. Hyper-B clock info. Yeah, guys, I need to know for sure if the Taichi has the external, the E clock, the asynchronous B clock. Does anybody know for a fact if the Taichi from ASRock has that feature? I would assume the Nova does not have that feature, but I have no idea. The Nova has good heat sinks. They're okay. I think the Taichi has better ones though. But they're okay, guys. Guys, the Nova has Gen 4, Gen 4, Gen 3. None of these SSDs need a big heatsink. The only SSD that needs a big heatsink is this one. And that's assuming you're actually using a Gen 5 SSD. If you're just going to run like a Samsung 990 Pro on this, that isn't even going to get hot because this thing already has a big enough heatsink for Gen 4. So, yeah, no, the Nova's heatsinks are totally fine for your run-of-the-mill Gen 4 or Gen 3 SSDs. I would not be concerned about the heat sinks for the type of SSDs that are going to go in here. All right, so I think that pretty much covers it. In terms of the final list, I think this is the final list. Is there an X870E Steel Legend? Last I checked, there is currently only an X870 Steel Legend. We'll talk about X870 later. That's coming next. You enjoy the lecture? Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Glad it was helpful. But yeah, the reason why we do this is because I understand, like, if you guys are going to build a computer, think about it. You're going to spend a lot of money to build a new computer, whether you're upgrading or you're building for the very first time. So obviously, you want to understand what exactly you're buying. What are you actually spending your money on? What is the sort of functionality that it has? Like, are you going to be surprised if you connect your graphics card and then one day you add another SSD to your computer, then all of a sudden your graphics card is running at half of the bandwidth? See, those are the sort of gotchas that you want to avoid when purchasing an expensive product like a motherboard as part of the entire build. What are you missing out versus the Taichi? Well, we literally drew the Taichi. We just drew the Taichi earlier. You're missing out on 2 additional SATA. The Taichi has 6 SATA. The Nova only has 4. The Nova gives you an extra, a 5th M.2. The Taichi does not give you a 5th M.2. Instead, the Taichi gives you an X8 Gen 5 slot that shares lanes with this when in use. Whereas the Nova gives you an X1 Gen 3 and an X2 Gen 3 if you opt to use them. E-clock, we don't know. That is the one thing that I don't know about these ASRock boards. I was hoping that somebody else in the chat would be able to explain or confirm whether or not the ASRock boards have the E-clock feature. That's the one thing that I do not know. Unfortunately, I tried researching it online. There is so little info. ASRock briefly mentions it in the user manual, but there's nothing, it's like never talked about. And then even the BIOS menu doesn't even, the BIOS manual doesn't even mention it. I would assume the Nova doesn't have it, but the Taichi might have it because it's $450 versus $350. But yeah, unfortunately, I mean, I don't know where you people are in the world, but we were talking about this earlier. Apparently the Nova is already sold out. Like, it's already sold out. Newegg doesn't have it anymore. Amazon is sold out. The only thing you'll see on Amazon are like third-party sellers trying to sell it for higher money. Like, they're jacking up the price, basically. They're trying to scalp, I guess. I don't know what they're doing, but yeah. So for bandwidth, the best is Nova and Taichi, correct? Yes, there are all the ASRock boards. If you want this to always be this, and you want to run 4 SSDs, or even 5. If you want 5 SSDs, Nova. If you want 4 SSDs and an X8 slot, but you're not really going to use the X8 slot, then you go Taichi. That's all there is to it. And maybe the Taichi has the B clock, but I don't actually know if it does. Yeah, E clock is nice to have, but I don't really know which boards have it. No, I don't know, Adam. I don't know why you have the red light there. You'd have to look on the board. What does that red light mean? Like, what is the, I guess the, what's the label for that LED? Imagine the X870E Nova with an RDNA 5 GPU. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, if you're building now, if you build with the Nova now, you're pretty much set for all the upcoming, like, X3D Ryzen CPUs. Also, any newer, like, Zen 6 or whatever. Like, you pretty much can keep the motherboard until the very last AM5 CPU, and you basically upgrade to that. It's like the people who, they started on AM4 with an X370 motherboard way back in 2017, and they could go all the way to a 5800 X3D. Oh, yeah. That is for the quick charge for the front panel 20 gigabit USB-C. That's what that's for. You can combine it with PBO. Yeah. We'll be talking about that in the future. I'm currently already using E-clock, so yeah, I know what you're talking about when it comes to the E-clock. We'll do that. We'll do a video on that in the future. Yeah, man, X570, like, well, just AM4 in general. ProArt diagram. I mean, it's kind of like the Strix, except it's worse. Would you be okay with the Nova or Taichi? I mean, you have to decide which one based off of the use case. I've shown you what it offers. You have to decide which one you actually need. I can't decide for you. I don't understand. I don't know what you're going to actually do with the computer. Is it possible for 8,100? No. You can do 8,000 or higher with 2 sticks, not with 4. With 192 gigabytes, 4 sticks, you could probably do like 52 to 56, maybe 6,000, but you have to really, really know what you're doing. I have a video on that. Check out the video that I did earlier this year on 192 gigabytes of memory. Most of the concepts still apply to the new motherboards. That being said, so on the topic of 192 gigabytes of RAM, I will be retesting that on the new Hero motherboard to test the limits of ASUS's advertised Nitro Path technology. What I can tell you guys, I don't know if you watched the video previously, but currently what I can show here, where is that camera again? So right here, and this is the computer that we are using to live stream right now. So look at this. So this is the X870E Crosshair Hero. And you can see the computer is live streaming right now. And we're on an air cooler. Where did I put my little... Oh. So you can see we are on a Noctua NHD15 air cooler. We are using the computer. It is at 41 degrees Celsius on air with a 5.9 gigahertz overclock. We have E clock and PBO and curve shaper enabled on this motherboard. And on top of that, you guys can see I am running 4 sticks of DDR5 at 6,000 megatransfers. However, this is a total of not 100. Sorry. This is 96. I almost said 192. This is 96 gigabytes of DDR5 at 6,000 on the new ROG Crosshair Hero from Asus. So if you guys watched the live build, so last Monday, it's almost been a week since I live streamed the build of this very PC. So go ahead and check that out. I mean, it shows the 4 sticks of memory. But yeah, you can do, with this motherboard, you can do 4 sticks of single rank DDR5 at 6,000 in a 1-to-1 ratio. That is exactly how I have it configured here. Now, when you go up to dual rank, so like, for example, if you want to do 128 gigabytes or 192 gigabytes, that is going to be significantly harder to do with DDR5, just because DDR5, you have to think about it. The density is a lot of RAM, and the speed, like if you're trying to run it at 6,000, is very, very high for that many memory modules. Then you have to take into account the distance between the RAM and the actual memory controller. So that is where Asus's NitroPath could come in handy. I won't really know the full extent of what is the limit on the NitroPath until I test 192 gigabytes, so I will do that. So be on the lookout for a video on that in the future. And I also want to test the upper limit on 1 DPC. So I want to test, for example, I have, where did I put that kit of RAM? Anyway, somewhere around here, I have a 8,000 kit of memory. I don't know where it is right now, but I've done this on the previous generation motherboards. So if you're interested in seeing how that works, do get subscribed to the channel. We will be doing a lot of in-depth coverage regarding DDR5, both 4 sticks, dual rank, as well as 2 sticks at very high speeds like 8,000, for example. We're going to try to push beyond 8,000 because I know 8,000 works. I've used 8,000 on my RAM on 2 sticks on the previous X870E. So that I know works for sure with the 9950X. I don't think I'm going to have the Nova. Are you asking me or are you asking somebody else? I don't have the Nova, and I don't have the Nova on the way. Unless ASRock wants to send me a review sample, it's already sold out. It's already sold out. So there's no way for me to get the Nova right now. Unless ASRock has a reserve, like a demo unit or something they can send for review. Yeah, man, for real. Like ASRock needs to send me the Nova. I want to do like 10 videos on that one motherboard. That motherboard is insane. The reason why, like, the thing is, guys, you have to remember, with computer hardware being as expensive as it is these days, like, it is very, very rare to find a motherboard that offers that much value. Like, you only see this like once every 10 years, if that, where you find a random electronic product that offers so much value compared to all the competitors, even compared to the brand's own other products. Like, the Nova arguably offers even better value than the Taichi. It's $100 cheaper than the Taichi. And it even offers a full backplate. This is the thing that is ridiculous about the Nova. Look at the Nova. The Nova has a fully, look at all the USB-A, the clear CMOS is there, you get 5 gig LAN, optical audio, you can drive 3 or more monitors off of the integrated graphics, 1 off of HDMI, 2 more off of the USB 4s. It's got all that other stuff. It's got the Wi-Fi 7 in there. It's got your RGB. It's got all those cables. But to top it off, it even has a backplate. When I heard that this thing had a backplate, I was literally just, wow. Wow. You know, like the meme, wow. Michael Hawthorne with the sub. Thanks for the subscription. Appreciate it. Welcome to the channel. The Nova's a miracle. I know. Like, when do you ever see a motherboard with a backplate for less than $500? Do you know if you want Asus to give you a motherboard with a backplate, you have to spend $700 to get the Hero. $700. The $500 Strix and the $480 ProArt, neither one of those have backplates, and they are way more expensive than this thing. Yeah, you can tell us. You don't have to put the link. I think YouTube will automatically delete the link. But yeah, you can just tell us the website. Assuming it's actually the official price and it's not actually being resold like on AliExpress or something. Nova lasted a full 5 days. I know, man. Like, you almost never see stuff like this. This is like impossible to find. If you told us the website, then we didn't see it. So I guess it got like automatically deleted by YouTube or something. We didn't see the website. So that means that YouTube automatically removed your comment because I didn't see it. You know what? Maybe YouTube staff doesn't want the public to know because they can buy it out before the viewers have a chance. Tinfoil hat moment. But yeah, seriously though, like you almost never see that. Centralcomputers.com. Okay. Well, there you go, boys. Centralcomputers.com still has the Nova. There's maybe B&H Photo has it too. B&H might have it too. In your computer, you'll connect two M.2s or two NVMe, two hard disk, one sound card, one GPU. Taichi and the Nova will be okay. Yeah, you'll be fine. Yeah, that's fine. That'll work. You can do all of that with the Nova. You can do all of that with the Taichi. Either one works fine. Keep in mind, guys, with those other boards, though, like, to the credit on the others, you know, like the Aorus Master, for example, just to use this one as an example, it's not until you go to the third SSD. You can do two SSDs. You can do two M.2s on all these boards, and you don't have to worry about lane sharing. It's once you go to the third M.2 on Gigabyte, on MSI, on Asus, then you hit lane sharing. On ASRock, there is no lane sharing, as we pointed out. So if you absolutely do not want to compromise your GPU lanes, you want them to be dedicated to the GPU all the time, and you do not want to think twice about it, go ASRock. It's that simple. Just go ASRock. Taichi Lite, Nova, all three of them. There is only one other motherboard that offers no GPU lane sharing, and that is the MSI Godlike. The Godlike is the only other one. This one. But this is insanely expensive. So it's like, if you want MSI, like MSI's like, oh, if you want your GPU to always be X16, you better be ready to give us a lot of money. That's MSI's policy on that. Because the Godlight can do it, but at a cost, at a very high cost. Well, that's cool. Okay, so it is still... Alright, that's nice to know that it's still available somewhere. Yeah, this thing, guys, the price on this is probably going to be anywhere from $1,000 to over $1,300. $1,300 for the MSI X870E Meg Godlike. Yes, that's US dollars. That's US dollars. You blame me for the Nova selling out? You know what's funny, though? You know what's funny, guys? This is another, like, weird tinfoil hat. I don't actually believe this, but, maybe, isn't it strange? Isn't it strange how no other tech channel is talking about the Nova? Everyone's just keeping quiet about it. You know that? You know, like, all the other tech channels, no, like, don't talk about the Nova. It's like, because they're all, like, in the back, they're all, like, ordering it for themselves. Then once it's sold out, lo and behold, here comes the reviews. Once nobody can buy it, once everybody has secured their Novas, then they're gonna start talking about it. No, I don't actually believe that. I'm just joking, but I mean that'd be hilarious. It's like, be quiet. Don't talk about the Nova. Don't talk about it yet. We're gonna get it in next week. Like, don't mention that. You know. No other tech channel mentions the lane sharing. I think it's because they don't really care, to be honest. They don't think it's an issue. I mean, and honestly, the lane sharing is it's not the end of the world. So, like, for example, let's use the Aorus Master, because this does a lot of lane sharing. So the Aorus Master, you know, like, it does lane sharing, but at the end of the day, you're probably, like, in the most PCI dependent games, you're really only losing maybe like 2 to 3% performance in a game like Horizon Forbidden West or Horizon Zero Dawn or Ratchet and Clank or those type of games that are very PCI bandwidth dependent, or games like Final Fantasy 16 or Forspoken, games that have direct storage like Spider-Man. Those are the sort of games that really like PCIe bandwidth. So if you don't play any of those games, you're not really going to notice much of a difference if you're running X8 versus if you're running X16. So like if you're playing, for example, like Overwatch or Call of Duty or Counter-Strike, you're never going to notice a significant difference running your GPU at X8 versus X16. But some of those newer games that use different engine technology, they actually scale with PCIe bandwidth. Also, no one is doing actual builds. You're still waiting? Yeah, I know, man. Azrock needs to send me a review sample. I'll do one. I didn't know about the board. I didn't know about the board until after the fact. So, yeah, it is kind of weird how, like, no one was talking about it. And then somebody mentioned it on one of my live streams, and then I saw it, and I was like, wait a minute, this thing is, like, way too good. How come I never knew about this? But see, like, for example, if we use the Aorus, right? Like this one, we go in the block diagram for Aorus. So Gigabyte is really nice at providing the block diagram. See? So the GPU, there's the switch, and there's the sharing. So here's the GPU. Here's the GPU by itself with nothing else plugged in. It gets full 16 lanes. Or it's like 16 for the GPU with nothing else plugged in, or 8 lanes to the GPU, and then 4 lanes for this one, and then 4 lanes for that one. See, so it's just like I drew in the block diagram. There's a whole bunch of sharing of the GPU lanes on a lot of these motherboards. So, but Gigabyte does provide that dual X4 right here. 4 here, 4 here. One is Gen 4, one is Gen 3. And it's the same for the Master, the Elite, the Pro, all of them. The Master has 8 layers. Yes, it's the only new Gigabyte board that has 8 layers. So currently the others have 6. Yeah, this is 8 layer. In fact, they mention it right somewhere on right here. 8 layer PCB. They mention it over here. 8 layer PCB. So the Master is an 8 layer. Yeah, man. I know, right? Like the Nova. But see, like once the Nova, I remember that live stream, like if I showed the Nova at the very beginning of the live stream, that would have just ruined it for all the other motherboards. That's why I feel bad for MSI. You know, because when I presented those boards in the live stream, the deep dive video, it was like a 5-hour video, guys. If you guys didn't catch that, you might want to go back and watch my live stream. It was called Tech Thursdays, episode 79. If you want to see the full details on every single one of these motherboards, go watch Tech Thursdays. It's the live stream show that I do every Thursday on this channel, where we basically went through all the motherboards in full detail. And I think we did Gigabyte first, then Asus, then ASRock, then MSI, then NZXT, and Biostar. And after, like when I got to ASRock, I was like, oh man, MSI it's gonna be a very tough act for MSI to follow. Yeah, we do stuff like this all the time. Like this channel is more like hardcore, in-depth, deep dive knowledge. Like we go deep on the technology. This is not a surface level channel. So if you guys are interested in learning and understanding the full behind the scenes how these things work in the PC building hobbyist space, like overclocking, DDR5, CPU, GPU, building a PC, all that stuff, PCIe, USB 4, all these topics, Wi-Fi 7 even, like we go in depth, like we go deep on this stuff on this channel. So if you like this sort of content, definitely like the video. I don't often advertise, like I don't like to be nagging people like, oh, like my video, subscribe to my channel. But if you genuinely feel like you have gotten a lot of educational info out of this, or you found it entertaining in its own way, definitely do subscribe to the channel, because we're going to be going deep on this type of stuff all the time. Every Thursdays, we have a show. I do a weekly show called Tech Thursdays. We've done 79 episodes now. The last episode was episode 79, and that was probably the longest episode ever. That was a 5-hour marathon live stream going over all of these motherboards back to back. No rest, no stop. So, yeah, we're gonna be diving into X870 as well in the near future. Ryan, thanks for the sub. I do have the affiliate links, guys. I do have the affiliate links. So if you want to, if you're looking at buying a motherboard, even if you don't want to buy a motherboard, if you go to my affiliate links in the description of the video, if you're shopping on Amazon or you're shopping on Newegg, that does help. I mean, that's one way to help. Like, but yeah, I guess I'll consider like the Patreon thing. Someone mentioned that. I think it was mentioned a couple times previously. So yeah, I'll probably look at that next. But yeah, I mean, that's the only way, because I don't get review samples. My channel's too small. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think there was one comment during that live stream. I'll never forget that comment. Somebody said something along the lines of, like the hell out of this video. I learned things in this live stream that I didn't even know I needed to ask. Best sub ever. I'll never forget that comment, because that comment pretty much summarized that entire, like, marathon of all those motherboards back to back. You have 2 SSDs, 1 for OS and 2 for games. You might send me the Taichi Nova. Wow, yeah, wait, what? You have 2, 1 for OS and 2nd for game. Okay, yeah. I've been using Intel for decades now. The new AM5 seems pretty good, especially for the workload. Yeah, honestly, between AMD and Intel, there's really not that much difference between them, guys. Like, the main difference is AMD is more energy efficient than Intel. But, like, if you're using an Intel and an AMD side by side, you're never going to be able to tell the difference between the two of them. They're both x86 architecture. They both perform relatively the same in Windows. From what I've heard, AMD is like a little bit better in Linux. Intel is a little bit better in some applications. AMD is better in other applications. So, you know, it's kind of back and forth. You will never... The bottom line is both of them are x86 processors. AMD provides... Okay, AMD provides more PCI... Yes, AMD provides more PCIe lanes. That is true. At least Gen 5 PCIe lanes. Yeah. There isn't really a big difference, guys. Like, even... So, at the end of the day, even if we're talking about gaming, like, Intel versus AMD in gaming, it's basically, it's like, the X3D CPUs are a little bit faster on average, and they use less electricity. That's basically it. So they win in the areas where it actually matters, especially if you're someone who is... Like, I said this on previous live streams, but because there's a lot of people that have probably not seen my channel before, I'll say this again. So, when I live stream, like, for example, like right now, or when I'm streaming on Tech Thursdays, I personally use the AMD PC for live streaming, and also especially while gaming, because if you're doing both, your graphics card is going to dump a lot of heat into the room, so the last thing you want is for your graphics card and your CPU both dumping a lot of waste heat into the room, especially if you're doing a 5-hour live stream extravaganza, or like a marathon stream, or a gaming related stream. Sometimes I do stream games. Usually I stream games on the weekend, so like we're doing a weekend stream right now. Typically this would be a gaming focused stream rather than a motherboard focused stream, but because the motherboards are new, I know that there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of, like, there was a ton of questions on this stream, for example, despite the tier list video being out today, and also, like, I did 2 or 3 or 4 live streams throughout the past week regarding this exact topic. So, and there's still a lot of questions. So that's why we're focusing on this right now. Have I got to use the 8-pin under pin? I have not used it because my power supply doesn't have an extra 8-pin. I'm using the 8 pins for the GPU. I'd have to go find my power supply box and dig out the extra, assuming I have another PCIe 8-pin cable. Your 7800X3D runs so cool. I know, man. 7800X3D, that CPU, it uses like no electricity while gaming. Like, it's crazy how efficient that is. Now, that being said, I do use both. So I have an Intel system. In fact, I have the 13900K. We'll be revisiting the 13900K in the future after all the BIOS updates are out. I'm currently waiting on the final BIOS update from Intel. In this case, Gigabyte, because Gigabyte... I have a Gigabyte motherboard for my 13900K, so I do plan to retest the 13900K. I've kind of like sidelined it because I don't want it to die due to the VMin issue, but I will revisit the 1300K in the future. But currently, like, I use, so for live streaming, I use AMD. For gaming, I use AMD. For like For like storage backup, that kind of stuff, I use the Intel system for that. That's actually what I use the 1300K for. Believe it or not, it's like a home server PC. That's how I use it. I don't actually use the 1300K for gaming, mainly because when I first evaluated it 2 years ago, it would instantly overheat at 100 degrees with a Noctua NHD15, and I figured early on, like this is not going to be usable for the way I use my computer. So that's why I've been on AMD for the past 2 years now when it comes to gaming, streaming, and content creation. But that being said, we will be focusing on Intel in the future. I know Intel has a new CPU coming out at some point real soon. We are going to be prepped on that, I think, like within the next 2 weeks or so. So expect a lot of leaks on Intel's new CPU and new motherboards, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, the Intel motherboards, I should say, you can expect the Intel motherboards to be very similar to these new AMD motherboards. So I expect them to offer USB 4, although on Intel they'll probably call it Thunderbolt 4 because Thunderbolt is Intel's thing. But it's basically the same thing, 40 gigabit USB-C with PCI tunneling. So basically the same thing. So I expect Intel to be pretty much the same as AMD when it comes to the motherboards in terms of the features. Now, we don't know exactly what the lane count is on Intel, but if you're comparing Z790 to X870E, or even the previous X670E, AMD offered more Gen 5 lanes than Intel. So the problem with Intel, with Z790 specifically, was, and this is probably another reason why I didn't use it for gaming, was they offered you a Gen 5 SSD on Z790. Every single Z790 motherboard that offered a Gen 5 SSD took the lanes from the graphics card to offer that. So pretty much it doesn't matter what brand, it doesn't matter what model, if the Z790 motherboard offered a Gen 5 SSD slot, they were pulling that off of the GPU lanes to give you that feature. So even if Intel's new CPU are good, the paranoia will linger. I mean, possibly for some people, but I think Intel's going to push a lot of that into pre-builds anyway, so they're not really going to. Basically, what I'm expecting is all of this stuff, all this bad press about the voltage killing the CPUs. In the grand scheme of things, that's not really going to impact Intel long term. Maybe their enterprise customers who got the game server companies that got burned by that, those guys will probably not use Intel for a long time. But I think the average gamer who doesn't build their own PC, who literally just buys a pre-built from Origin or, Omen, HP Omen, Dell Alienware, anyone who's going to buy like some random pre-build, they're not even going to think about the Intel problem. They're just going to blindly pick something on the website and order it, and it'll probably come with an Intel CPU. So that's typically how it goes. So I don't really expect this to impact Intel too much, at least within the pre-built market. Maybe the DIY market, like our market, like the PC enthusiast community, maybe a lot of people in this market might stay away from Intel at least one generation or two. But in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's going to really do much in terms of damage to Intel's brand. You see the light at the top right is now red. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's just because the PCI X8 slot's not plugged in or something. You're going to just wait on all the benchmarks, and sometime we'll know if the new Intel CPUs are good. So here's my expectation for the new Intel CPUs. I assume that the power consumption on the new Intel CPUs will be significantly lower than the 13th and 14th gen. So they're going to be more energy efficient than those current Intel CPUs. In fact, they might even match AMD's Zen 5 CPUs. I wouldn't be surprised if they match AMD in terms of energy efficiency. However, here's how I think it's going to go down. I think the single thread on the new Intel is not going to be that much faster than the existing 14th gen. Where Intel will get the most benefit with this new CPU architecture is with the E cores. The E cores on the new upcoming Intel, I think, are going to be way better than the old E cores on the Raptor Lake. And ultimately what that means is that the new E cores are so much more powerful that Intel no longer needs hyperthreading for multi-core workloads. I think the E cores are going to be so strong that not in single thread, but as a group, as a whole, together they will be very strong at multi-threaded workloads. So, for example, a 24 thread, 24 core, 24 thread Intel Ultra 9 will most likely be able to outperform a 24 core, 32 thread 14900K. Both of them at stock settings. I expect the new Intel to win against the 14900K in multi-threaded workloads by a decent amount. But I don't think the single thread will be that much faster because I don't think Intel focused that much on improving the P cores. I think it's mostly the E cores. Yo, Tom, thanks for the sub. Much appreciated. Multi-threaded performance. Yeah, the P cores got a reduction and the E cores have gotten yes. So what that means is expect Intel's multi-thread results to look really impressive, but their single-thread results are not going to be that much better than where they were before. In fact, I was looking at the leaked numbers for Intel CPUs, and when I saw the numbers, like Geekbench has been leaked, I think like R24 or something was leaked previously. Assuming those are stock and not somebody with a review sample that's overclocking, that's why we won't really know the true performance until they're actually out. But I think the single thread is very similar to AMD's Ryzen 9000. So Zen 5 and Intel's Arrow Lake are going to be very similar in terms of single thread performance. And then in multi-thread, Zen 5, well, okay, it depends on the tier. So as you go down the stack, the Intel will be probably better because they have more threads at the low end. But as you go up to like Ryzen 9 9950X versus the Intel Ultra 9, the Ryzen will win because the Ryzen it'll win out of sheer number of threads because it has 32 threads versus Intel's 24 threads. So that's what I'm expecting to see happen. The power draw will be reduced. I don't think the new Intel will use as much power as the 14th gen CPUs. But I don't think it's going to use that much less. It will use less, but it's not going to be like way, way less. So it may be similar to AMD's Zen 4 CPUs. So I'm going to guess that Intel's new CPUs pull power like AMD's 7000 series CPUs, which means the 9000 is still more energy efficient, slightly, than the new Intel. But when you add X3D, then X3 is just like way more efficient. So that's why I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens when the 9000 X3D shows up, because those are going to be monster gaming CPUs. Because what people have not actually focused on is the fact that AMD's single thread performance on Zen 5 is actually a lot better than Zen 4. A lot of people seem to have forgotten that. And you combine the Zen 5 IPC with 3D V-Cache, and you'll see what that uplift looks like. You're thinking about going AMD just to try out the 9950X3D later due to the... See, ideally, here's the thing, guys. Ideally, you would have both. A true enthusiast should have exposure to both AMD and Intel. This is my opinion. as a hardware enthusiast, as someone who's been doing this as a hobby for a long time, I have used AMD and Intel for years. I have built multiple Intel, I've built multiple AMD, so I know the ins and outs of both of them. I feel like if somebody only has Intel or if somebody only has AMD, they don't have the full picture. They only have half the coin, so to speak. Like, they don't actually know what the other side is like because they haven't actually used it themselves. They're just going off of like what they hear, what other people say and stuff. Like, they don't actually know firsthand. So, and I know I'm not someone who lives by that philosophy. Like, if I'm going to truly claim that I understand how something works and give my opinion on it, I will use both solutions. So that's why I have a backup. I have the Intel as a backup computer. The AMD is the primary. So, you know, like, it could go either way. I could use the Intel primary because the AMD backup doesn't really matter. The AMD one, currently, the AMD one is more energy efficient. It is more reliable, hence why it is the primary system. But if you only have Intel, you don't actually, you have no idea what you're missing out. Like, I'll tell you this, guys, overclocking on AMD, especially these new Zen 5 CPUs, is the most fun that I have had overclocking a CPU in 10 years. Justin, it depends on what you're building your computer for. Like, let me tell you something, guys. X3D, as good as it is for gaming, if you want to do other things with your computer, like if you want to render videos, if you want to do like things that use a lot of cores, a lot of threads, the 9950X, which is what I'm streaming on right now, literally I'm using a 9950X with a X870E Crosshair Hero, which we built this PC live almost a week ago on stream. This is a workhorse. This thing, like, crunches numbers. It can render videos in DaVinci Resolve 4K 60 super fast. It is a beast of a machine without having to step up to a Threadripper. So if you want to do like a bunch of stuff with your computer besides gaming, however, you can wait for X3D, specifically a 9950 X3D. You could wait for that just to see how that pans out. But I have no idea when that's supposed to show up. And, that's probably going to use less power. But we'll see what it actually does. It's like, I don't know. I have no idea what AMD's planning to do with that. Seems like more cores makes using Windows feel. Maybe. I don't really notice a difference, to be honest, when it comes to just Windows. You're waiting for Zen 6 or Intel 2025 to upgrade the 5950X. Yeah, if you guys want to see my review, so I reviewed the 5950X. I also reviewed the 9700X. For some reason, the YouTube algorithm did not pick up this video, and I did not get many views for my 9700X review. Maybe because it was like a 20-something minute video. It was a very in-depth video, whereas I did a more condensed version for the 9950X. If you want to see like my full take on the new Zen 5 CPUs, I reviewed them when they were new. I will definitely have to retest them before long because of all the the BIOS, the Agisa, the Windows update, all that stuff. So I do need to retest them. But even without all the updates, I saw decent uplifts in performance. So I was like Tom's Hardware. I thought it was a pretty good upgrade over the Zen 4. And the reality, so when it came time to to show the difference between gaming, like 9700X versus 7800X3E, the 7800X3E was only like 4% faster in gaming, like at 1080p. You're not even really going to notice that. So the one thing I will say though, 7800X3E is so efficient That thing barely uses power compared to the non-X3D. So that, but you know, compared to Intel, it's like a completely different world. Like the Intel's on a completely different planet in terms of like how much power that thing pulls compared while gaming compared to the X3D. The 5700 X3D was so cheap recently. Yeah. Well, I think so. I think AM4 is going to clear out like within the next 6 to 8 months. I mean, Zen 4 production has already wind down. I think Zen 3 is also going to slowly wind down. I mean, I don't even think you can get... Is it still possible to find the 5800X3D? Or do they stop manufacturing that? Because that's another one that you can't find that often. 7600X3D. 7600X3D is very good if you're trying to build a very low-cost gaming PC. I think that's a decent one for like a small form factor. Like, okay, 7600X3D, that would be perfect for like a really small form factor PC. It's very low power. That thing like pulls such low amounts of power. You don't need a super high-end cooler. You know, you just, whatever, you know, like any random competent air cooler will work. They even started making that. Yeah, but I don't know what the plan is for AM4. I feel like AM4 has been around for so long that it's just kind of like a permanent fixture. It's like, when is AM4 going to go away? You like a big PC case? I do too. That's why I don't do small form factor builds. I think I'm still on 23H2. I don't think I upgraded any of my PCs. So yeah, we'll see. Hussar, some of that stuff that you're reading about the memory speed, that's based off of CUDIM. So that applies to both. The Be Quiet Shadow Base 800 case, pretty big mid tower. Okay, yeah. I mean, it's yeah, it's cool. Haven't touched any AMD since 2700X, although you recently bought it. It is very different now, by the way. PC case review? Case review of what? I don't normally do PC case reviews because I don't actually get any review samples, so it's like I don't really... I mean, I could review my own case. I don't know, it's probably full of dust. Yeah, one thing I want to see, like, CUDIM, I'm actually very interested in the new DDR5. Like, CUDIM or CUDIM, I say CUDIM, but CUDIM, you know, that stuff. Like, MSI has that support already on the Carbon. So for those of you that are wanting to know which motherboard, so MSI already has the CUDIM on their Carbon and the Godlike. I think Tomahawk also. I think all of the MSI X870 and X870E motherboards already have the CUDIM. Wow, their website scales really weird. Godlike has it, yeah. So that is something that I will be very interested in seeing because that will allow pushing the memory speeds up really high because of that redriver. Fractal Torrent is the other case. That's my live stream case. So, I don't know. Someone asked me before to do like a behind the scenes video just showing like what the setup looks like. I guess I'll do like an updated version of that. Yeah, I guess I'll do that video. But basically, like, it's very simple, guys. So, like, where I'm sitting right here, down here to the right of me is what you guys are seeing on the camera down there in the corner. That is the Lian Li Lancool 3 with the X870E build with the 9950X. And then over to the left of me is the Tech Thursdays studio setup. So, you know, that's the one with the lighting and all that stuff. That one has the X670E Aorus Master from Gigabyte with a 7950X3D in a fractal torrent case. Your O11 Mid-Tower Derbauer edition. Newest PCI NVMe doesn't seem to perform that much faster in real life using the synthetic benchmarks. Why? Well, until software takes better advantage of the NVMe speeds, you won't really see a benefit. That's what things like direct storage are supposed to do. They're supposed to help with that. That's the whole point of direct storage and newer technology for games. And just the way applications send data. You know, like, that's all there is to it. Alright, guys. So we've been live for over 3 hours. I think this is a good stopping point. Yota. Or Jota, I'm not sure. Thanks for the sub. Much appreciated. So yeah, if you guys like this PC DIY stuff, I mean, definitely get subscribed to the channel. Like I said earlier, if you're new to the channel, I do the live streams. The regular live stream that you can expect with consistency is every Thursday evenings, North America time, or I guess South America time, a bit later in the evening for South America. But yeah, we do these live streams every Thursdays for sure. And then sometimes we'll do special live streams like this one on the weekend. And that's pretty much it. And then you'll see like the regular YouTube video uploads depending on the subject. So do follow the channel. Like, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell if you want to know when I go live. Because sometimes I'll go live, you know, just like randomly. So, oh, I didn't catch that sub. I didn't see who that was. So, apologize for that. But thank you for the sub. Thanks for subscribing, guys. So that's going to be it for this stream. Oh, you found the CPU specs for Taichi. It had external B clock. For the new one or the old one? Alright, guys. Well, yeah, we'll dig into more of the overclocking topics in the future, especially the E-clock one, because that's a very interesting one. X870E, alright, man. Yeah, that's cool. That's great. If anybody out there gets the X870E Taichi, let me know if it does have the E-clock mode. Like, if you confirm that it has the B-clock. Not that I'm doubting you, CL. I want to see, like, what the menu, like, what's in the menu for that, because the Taichi is one that's supposed to have it, so it should be pretty good for overclocking. Plus that VRM. Anyway, guys, that's going to be it for this stream. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you guys on Tech Thursdays. Thanks.